What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was banished and wiped out Konoha instantly? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Pain stared down at the broke, bloody body lying at his feet. Never before had anyone actually made him fear. If he hadn't have activated everything in his arsenal, he would be dead. Plain and simple. Yet the boy hadn't even reached his potential. Such a pity. Their battle had wiped out at least 3/4 of the Hidden Leaf village, killing possibly over 10,000 villages, along with 1,000 shinobi. Most of that had been the boy, however. The fox had taken over and gone berserk. Such power the boy possessed, it was truly amazing. "Do you hate me now, boy?" Pain asked, studying Naruto. There was no reply. Naruto could hardly reply in his current state. He had used 7 Rasen Shuriken and 4 Big Ball Rasengans. Naruto was drained and he knew it. Naruto was just awaiting death now, ready to greet it like an old friend. "Boy, the world is my oyster. I am currently the most powerful shinobi alive. I would finish you now, but unfortunately there is a large mass of movement this way. It's a shame the Akatsuki could use you," Pain said impassively. "Get lost, I would never betray my friends," Naruto roared at him, his voice cracking at the last. "But what if your friends were to betray you, boy? I can hear them already, chanting your name, along with the words death and kill. They hate you, boy, they hate everything about you. You saved their village but in the process destroyed it. Thousands have died, yet it was not all your fault. Yet they solely blame you, as the Nine-Tails beast. Think on what I have said. We will be waiting." Pain leapt off, leaving the battered, bloody body of Naruto in stunned shock. He also had said that the village hated him. What had he done wrong? And all that about the Nine-Tails? Had he lost control? Visions of death and destruction passed through his mind. What had he done? Several minutes later he heard the chanting. "Kill, kill, kill, death to the beast, death to the body." Naruto managed to drag his body around to the incoming chants, his eyes narrowing in fear and suspicion. Coming towards him was every remaining member of the village. 20,000 angry faces were aimed straight at him. They marched carrying an assortment of weaponry, pitchforks, swords and axes. "Hold, do not take a step closer," a voice boomed. Tsunade, the Hokage, stood before Naruto. At her voice the crowd halted, their voices stilled. More and more of the surviving Leaf Shinobi begun to form up at her side. Yet their faces were covered in hatred and fear. Especially the older shinobi, who had witnessed the death and destruction once before. "Naruto will be taken for healing, then judgment will be made by the council. Not the villagers without thought and consideration." Tsunade boomed at them. She too felt scared of what had happened. Yet her fear was aimed towards what would happen to Naruto now. "Get the crowds back, begin repair work immediately. Tend to the wounded and get out searching for Pain." Tsunade called out order after order. "Shikaku, take over. The council will want to see Naruto." The aged strategist looked down at the young man lying before him. He was one of few who looked at him with sadness. Knowing his fate, he then quickly set about his task. Gathering shinobi, we walked off. "Kakashi, gather him up. He has a meeting with the council," Tsunade whispered. Tsunade looked around at the destruction of her village. Sakura stood cradling the broken figures of her parents. She turned and was surprised to see anger on the face of the copycat ninja. "Naruto, what have you done?" Kakashi mumbled. "You said you could control it." He bent down and picked Naruto off the floor. The pair of them leapt off, leaving the anger and hatred behind. "You cannot be serious," Naruto cried out, anger surfacing for the first time in the meeting. "It is that or death, Naruto. My hands are tied," Tsunade exclaimed back at him. "What choice did I have?" Naruto slumped then. The village had betrayed him, his friends had abandoned him. Not one had spoken to him since the fight that had torn apart the village. Alone he had been in his cell. Only his thoughts and his clones to keep him company. His mind kept flashing back to what Pain had said. "They hate you, boy." Then he had thought that the guy was crazy. His village would never betray him, yet here he was, being told that he had to give up shinobi life, become a prisoner of the Leaf Village. That he would live his life in a cell with a chakra seal over him, preventing any use of chakra whatsoever. It was then and there that his mind was made. "Do what you must," he stated simply, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Tsunade looked at Naruto, her sadness threatening to tip over the edge. You have one day to prepare yourself. Say goodbyes or pay respects. After that you will not see a human again. Anbu will be watching you wherever you go. The female elder told him. On the outside Naruto looked defeated and resigned to his fate. But inside he was already plotting his escape. He needed out of this village. He stumbled out of the Hokage's office, walking aimlessly through the corridors. As he neared the exit he saw two people he had hoped to avoid. Sakura and Kakashi-sensei. They were deep in conversation. Kakashi had his arm on Sakura's shoulder and seemed to be comforting her. They both looked up when they heard footsteps. Sakura's face contorted in anger upon sight on Naruto. Sakura, Naruto tried. Go away you monster. Sakura cried out. Get out of here. Naruto recoiled at the pure hatred on his teammate's face. Sakura. He tried again. I said get lost. Sakura roared. She stepped forwards and punched him, yet there was no chakra behind it. It was a purely normal punch. Instead of destroying him, she had decided to send a message. Their friendship was over. Naruto stumbled back, holding his cheek in on hand. Kakashi-sensei. He mumbled. Kakashi didn't answer, he just guided Sakura away. He didn't even glance over his shoulder. Naruto stumbled away, walking back to his apartment. Darkness consumed him on the way. Naruto woke up on the day he was meant to leave the village. He glanced over at his clock. 2 a.m. Perfect. Naruto began to pack, gathering only the essentials. He needed to move fast and hard. He needed out of this village. Naruto gathered one set of spare clothes, some spare food rations and spare weapons. Nothing else he needed. He considered taking the photos he had. But rage consumed him. In a fit of anger he threw them across the room. He walked over, staring down at the cracked picture frames containing photos of Team 7 and his friends. The only photo he kept was of Jiraiya. That was his precious person. Naruto spun as the door slammed open. The 4 Anbu who had been stationed to watch him came running in. The rage entered Naruto again. His eyes changed into the red slits of the fox. Chakras swirled around him. The Anbu instantly reacted, beginning the hand signs for their sealing jutsus. But before they even completed the first sign, Naruto was on them. Naruto leapt forwards, throwing his fist forwards. The connected solidly snapping the head of the Anbu leader back. There was an audible snap as his spine broke. Spinning Naruto's foot slammed into the abdomen of the second Anbu. Followed by a kunai through the back of the Anbu's head. The third Anbu swung a lightning-fast punch straight at Naruto's head. Only to be met with thin air. The Anbu grunted as a kunai erupted from his stomach. Blood spewing everywhere. Naruto turned to the last Anbu, who was preparing themselves for the oncoming fight. Tell the higher-ups that if they follow me, they will die. Any force they send will be crushed. You saw how fast I killed 3 elite shinobi. I could crush any force you send. Understand? Naruto practically roared the last part. Also tell my friends of the Konoha 11 that if I see any of them again, there is a good chance I will kill them. The Anbu carefully considered his options, before nodding and then vanished in a cloud of smoke. Naruto surveyed his handiwork. Not bad kid. Naruto started. Where had their voice come from? You're not gonna find me anywhere outside your mind, kid. I'm inside. Naruto felt himself switch through space. He found himself standing in a dark corridor. He instantly knew where he was and who the voice was. Fox, what do you want? He called to the darkness. I'm here to help you. You see, this Naruto suits me. Hatred and anger that can be converted into power. What's your idea then, Fox? Naruto said, looking up at the mass of fur behind the cage. I'll explain all when we are out. Until then you need to run. All in good time, kid. Let us see what they have to say before I propose anything. Now get moving, I can feel several presences heading this way. We can't afford to miss our little date, can we? With that the fox retreated into the darkness. Naruto took one last look at his old apartment. He then leapt out of the window, heading out of the village. From far away he heard the screams of anger, recognizing them as the remaining members of the Konoha 11. Naruto leapt from branch to branch. He could feel the Anbu gaining ground on him. 2 whole squads sent after him. They must have decided to kill him then. Anger surged. How dare they after he had saved the village? He was broken from his angry thoughts when a kunai slammed into his shoulder. Naruto went spinning off the branch he was on, crashing into a tree. He slid down the tree thudding to the floor. Kid, you gotta move. I can't help you, the seal is preventing my chakra from leaving. Damn it, why now? Naruto had been about to respond when another kunai thudded into his leg. He cried out in pain. So this is the demon kid. Not much, I heard he was stronger. An Anbu with an owl mask said. Shut up and kill him. I want to get back for the celebrations. Another Anbu said, his frog mask covering his face. Naruto groaned, shutting his eyes. He had prepared himself for the end. I'm sorry, Fox. He felt a boot slam into his head, sending him spinning away. He slid across the floor. He tried to pull himself up, however another boot hit his back, sending him crashing into the ground. It's all over now, boy. The frog Anbu said. The rest of the Anbu were watching with smiles behind their masks. I wouldn't say that, a voice said. Naruto managed to open one eye, seeing before him a stocky man. He looked about 5 foot 11 inches tall. He had broad shoulders, sporting heavily muscled arms. His legs looked like they had absolutely no fat on them at all. Pure muscle. He wore a black tank top with black trousers. He had heavy black boots. His lower face was covered in a mask similar to what Kakashi wore. Step away from the boy. He growled. Or what? Get lost, the Anbu said. Or I'll kick your ass, kiddo. The man said. He leapt forward, spinning. His foot slammed into the first Anbu, sending him flying. The Anbu slumped against the tree he hit, knocked out. The man then used his momentum to crunch his elbow into the next Anbu, sending his neck snapping back, killing him instantly. The man then ducked under a lightning-fast sword sweep, pulling out a thick dagger from his jacket pocket. He spun it around his finger before slamming it into the Anbu's throat. He then went to work on 2 more Anbu, quickly killing them. He managed to duck under a sweeping foot, slamming the dagger into the thigh of the attacking Anbu. His fist came up in a devastating uppercut. The Anbu dropped with his spine shattered. The man stepped back then, nodding to himself. He jogged over to Naruto, doing a quick examination of his body, checking for wounds. He grunted to himself. We gotta get you help, kid, and soon. He pulled up Naruto, slinging him over his shoulder. He turned, surveying the dead Anbu. He sighed before leaping off. 1 week later, Hawk sat watching Naruto. The young blonde had woken up from a medically induced coma a couple of hours ago. He had smiled as the young blonde sat bolt upright, demanding ramen. His laugh had broken the tension created as Naruto studied him. After the introductions and recap of what had happened, Naruto had gone deadly quiet. The pair were sitting on a river bank in front of their camp. Hawk, can I ask you a question? Naruto said. Ask away, kid, Hawk said, watching the fish swim down the river. Why did you save me? Interesting question. Well, to be honest, there were several reasons. The stocky man said. Firstly, I saw potential in you. Secondly, I witnessed how you protected that village. You got skills, kid. Thirdly, after seeing what the villagers did to Ya, I figured you needed somewhere to go. Potential in me? Naruto asked. Yeah, you got powers, kid. Needs controlling and training, but you could become a force of nature one day. Hawk said. He saw the blonde frown. His eyes were full of despair. Training I want to give you. The blonde spun around, staring at him. Why would you want to train me? There has to be a reason? Well, firstly, as I said, you could become godly strong, kid. Secondly, I was hoping that you might join us. Hawk said, watching the young shinobi. Who's us? My organization. The Hunters are a group of extremely powerful shinobi, on par, maybe stronger than the Akatsuki. We keep the peace behind the scenes. If war looks like it's about to sprout, we stop it. We also hunt and kill bandits and protect the helpless. We also do multiple very high-end mercenary jobs. So why me? Naruto asked. I figured you would like to join us. You could grow and fulfill your potential. Secondly, we have a space. Alright, I accept. Hawk blinked. He had at least expected the kid to think about it. You not gonna think about it? Hawk said in surprise. Well, I haven't got anywhere else to go. Plus, the stronger I get, the closer I am to destroying Konoha. Naruto said impassively. Hawk winced at the destroyed Konoha bit, however he was generally happy with that outcome. Let's get started then, kid, your hell starts now. Hawk said with a grin that scared Naruto a bit. 3 years later, Hawk ducked under a sweeping kick before leaping away from a reversal kick. He was forced further and further back by his student. He swayed away from another punch before slamming in a fist of his own into his student. He was rewarded with a puff of smoke. He spun in time to see a boot thud into his face. He grunted, stumbling backwards. He just managed to duck under the swinging left fist of Kitsune. He leapt backwards, his hands moving at a lightning pace. Water spear jutsu, he roared. 6 massive pillars shot towards Kitsune. The latter just managed to flip out of the way. Kitsune leapt forwards, his fists igniting with powerful flames. Fire fist jutsu. Hawk ducked under one fist but was slammed by the other. He soared backwards, crashing into a tree. He slid down the tree, hitting the ground with a thud. He saw Kitsune was about to move in for another attack when he raised his arms. "Alright, that's enough," he called out. Kitsune stopped, looking disappointed. Well, his body language said disappointed. His actual face was covered by a hood and face mask. He grunted, before letting the flames out on his fists. "You're getting slow, sensei," Kitsune said, turning to pick up the equipment he had left at their camp. "You're just getting faster, kid," Hawk said with a grin. "I think we both know what I'm going to say here." Kitsune grunted as he leaned down, checking his katana blade. "As of now, you are a part of the Hunters. As of today, you will begin to receive client messages. You are free to take whatever missions you want. The Hunters will take 40% of any earnings as organizational funds. Also, we will send you missions from time to time. This may include recon missions or assassination missions intended to keep the balance of power between villages." Hawk said. "Fair enough," Kitsune said. "And surprisingly enough, I have a mission for you. Kill off 5 bandit warlords located with the Fire Country," Hawk said. Kitsune glanced round sharply before nodding. "Fair enough," was all he had to say. "Remember, kid, if we can still move our legs," Hawk said with a grin. "We can swing our fists," Kitsune said, grinning underneath his mask. The pair locked forearms. "You better get going, kid, leave no prisoners," Hawk said after a time. Kitsune looked at him as if such a thing disgusted him. Then he vanished. Hawk sighed, feeling sorry for those bandits. 3 months later in Konoha, Sakura and Kakashi stood before Tsunade inside her office. "Listen up, you two. I'm creating a 4-man squad with the sole purpose of finding Sasuke Uchiha," Tsunade said, watching their responses to such a statement. "Lady Hokage, why are we looking for Sasuke instead of Naruto?" Sakura demanded. "It's the council's choice, not mine. I was overruled. We also need him to keep the mob down. They too are providing pressure that we need him more than ever," Tsunade said. "Why is that?" Kakashi asked. "We have been receiving reports of bandit villages on our borders being burnt to the ground. I sent ambush squads to see what had happened, and the reports they came back with are gruesome. Someone or something very, very powerful is hunting down the bandits," Tsunade said. Seeing they were unimpressed, she took a different tactic. Each village had 150 chunin or higher skilled bandits. The pair's eyes widened. "Fair enough. Okay, who can we have on our team then, Lady Hokage?" Kakashi asked. "You are taking yourself, Sakura, Might Guy and Neji Hyuga," Tsunade said. Kakashi nodded. "That was a pretty balanced team. You leave in 2 months," Tsunade said. "What, why?" Sakura demanded. "With this bandit killing force, I don't want 4 of my top shinobi in the Fire Country. We wait until it's quietened down before we do anything," Tsunade said. The pair nodded before turning and leaving Tsunade alone. She flicked open the bingo books she had. In 4 out of the 5 there were reports of a shinobi known as Kitsune, ranked as an S-class mercenary. She read his profile. Name: Kitsune. Age: unknown. Criminal rank: S-class. Bounty: 20 million ryo. Organization: a group known as the Hunters. Status: active. Recognizable traits: last seen wearing a pure black trench coat alone with black face mask and hood. Black trousers and boots. Black fingerless gloves. Has a katana strapped across his back. Wanted for 39 assassinations across multiple different nations. 12 destruction of villages close to multiple borders. Warning: do not approach without large reinforcements. Wanted dead or alive. Tsunade's eyes widened at the sight the bounty. He was really wanted by several different nations. She flicked through the book until she came to the Hunters page. Organizational name: Hunters. Criminal ranking: S-class. Average ranking: all S-class shinobi. Village allegiance: none. Known information: the Hunters appeared over a decade ago. They claimed to keep the peace between nations. They always side with the weaker in a fight. Tsunade frowned at the lack of information. She was hoping she had something more to base her choices which could affect the whole village on. Sighing, she turned to look out over the village. 2 months later, Sakura, Guy and Neji were excitedly awaiting Kakashi and Tsunade at the main gate. They were the first Sasuke rescue squad sent out since Shikamaru's squad years ago. They had packed enough food and Ryo for several months in the field. They would be heading directly into the Hidden Sound Village's land in an attempt to get news about the young Uchiha. Kakashi, where have you been? The fires of youth have been ready to burn brightly. Guy roared as he saw Hitaki and the Hokage walking towards them. Guy-sensei, please. Neji begged. Alright, listen up. Your mission is to purely find information about Sasuke. Do not engage unless needed. Once you have found the Uchiha, send a message back. A support team consisting of Asuma, Lee, Hinata and Shikamaru. Tsunade said. Alright, I'll send the message back on Pakun, Kakashi said. Oh, and one more thing. We have received word about the shinobi known as, Tsunade began to say before she was interrupted. Approaching the gate, a ninja on the walls shouted. The 5 shinobi below the gate spun and stared out at the path. A single figure was walking towards them, dressed in pure black. He had a trench coat that reached down to his knees and was unbuttoned. Underneath he had a loose-fitting black shirt. He had black trousers with black boots. He had a hood attached to his trench coat and was sporting a mask similar to what Kakashi wore. On his shoulder he had what looked like an unconscious person. However, they couldn't see his face. Kitsune, Tsunade whispered. Kakashi glanced at her, his single eye raised in surprise. They all watched as they drew nearer until he was within 10 feet of the gate. He stopped, staring at them. What is your business here, mercenary? Tsunade demanded. I'm here on unofficial business, Hokage. On a whim, if I'm honest. Here to return one of your ninja. The masked man said. He grabbed the form on his shoulder and dropped it. Every shinobi who was present's eyes widened. The form was none other than Sasuke Uchiha. I've removed the cursed mark, and removed any genjutsu put on him. The masked man said, turning to walk off. Why? Why would you do this? Sakura demanded, her voice cracking at the last. As I said, it was on a whim. The masked man then vanished as if into thin air. The Konoha shinobi stood there in shock. 2 years 7 months later. The masked man stared down at the burning bandit war camp. Bodies littered the floor, blood ran in rivers. This was a place of death. He was dressed head to toe in pure black, so he seemed to blend in with the darkness of the night. His face was covered, he was a face mask and dark trench coat. He was unrecognizable. I see you finished your mission then, Kitsune. Kitsune didn't turn around, but responded anyways. Hawk, you are living up to your reputation at least, said Hawk. The stocky man was studying Kitsune. Why are you here, Hawk? Kitsune said. Hawk looked at his former student who was filled with grief and depression. Flashes of his old self appeared, but he was a shadow of the kid he'd known. Loki is calling us back, it's time we intervene in the upcoming war. Hawk said. Meet us in the usual place. I'll be there after I'm finished here. Give me a week, Kitsune said. Hawk merely nodded and vanished into thin air. Kitsune shook his head. Those idiot Kage getting into more wars. Do they not know the benefits from peace between the countries? If a war arises, they will be innocents dying. In peace there are only bandits to deal with. He grunted before raising his hands to the sky. Unholy cleansing aura jutsu, he roared. A massive pillar of light burst from his hands, slamming into the middle of the camp. The entire camp was filled with a deafening roar as pure chakra erupted from the middle of it, spreading outwards. After several moments the light receded. All that was left was an open dirt plain where the camp had stood. Kitsune nodded, turning away, his job was done. Tsunade sat in the Hokage palace, before her were the council and her advisors. A great shinobi war was on the brink of erupting and it was not looking good for the Southern Alliance. Orochimaru had managed to seal alliances with 2 huge powers in Iwagakure and Kumogakure along with Takigakure, Yugakure and Shimogakure. If that wasn't bad enough, they had also sealed deals with the Akatsuki. The Southern Alliance, however, consisted of Konohagakure, Sanagakure and Tanigakure. They were badly outnumbered and outpowered. Ishigakure, Kusagakure, Omegakure and Kirigakure had remained neutral, however they had sent messages saying that if either alliance's forces were seen on their land they would join the opposing alliance. Tsunade, it's not looking good. We are currently going to lose this war. Our latest reports state that the Northern Alliance's forces are gathering in Otogakure ready to strike at us. We need to call on Suna to push at Iwagakure whilst we defend. Tanigakure forces should head with him. All we need to do is defend whilst they destroy them from behind. Homura said. If we do that, how are we meant to defend against the Akatsuki, Orochimaru and the Northern Alliance? Tsunade cried out, throwing her hands into the air. They all stood there. It took several minutes before someone had the courage to speak up. We could ask the hunters? Kakashi said, watching Tsunade's reaction. Would they even help us? Shizune said. Yes, they would. They side with the weaker one to restore peace. Kaharu said. I vote we get into contact with them. There was a chorus of agreement from the members of the War Council and advisors. Fine, fine. Where would we even find them? Tsunade said, sighing. I can deal with that. I know where their base was. I'm not sure if it's moved or not, but I'll give it a go. Leave it to me, Jiraiya said, stepping out from the shadows of the office. Fine, but be careful these people. I want you to take Sakura and Kiba with you. Tsunade said. I want you go by tomorrow morning. Go. The council left, leaving just Jiraiya with Tsunade. We could sure use the kid back at this time. Jiraiya murmured, watching Tsunade's reaction. Jiraiya, leave now. Just go, Tsunade said, tears streaming down her face. Jiraiya turned, leaping out through the window, leaving a sobbing Tsunade. The Toad Sage leapt off, heading towards the graveyard. He needed to see it again before he left. 1 week later, the four people looked up as they saw the door open. A man dressed in pure black stepped in, nodding to them. Kitsune, good of you to join us. One of them said. Sorry I'm late, Loki. Kitsune said. He pulled up a chair and sat down at the end. It's fine, kid, we were just about to begin. Hawk said, grinning. Right, where will we meet you? Loki asked the young woman sitting next to him. Listen up, the world is currently divided into 3 different factions. We have the Northern Alliance made up of Otogakure, Kumogakure, Shimogakure, Takigakure, Yugakure and Iwagakure. The Akatsuki have also sided with them, she said. Kitsune shifted slightly with that, but nodded to carry on. Next we have the Southern Alliance. This is the weaker of the two. Its members include Sanagakure, Konohagakure and Tanigakure. This is the alliance we will be supporting. Everyone turned to see Kitsune sliding his chair back and standing up. The rest are neutrals? Excellent, I'm heading upstairs for a bit, he said before turning and heading upstairs to the inn they were renting. What's up with him? A young man known as Sina asked. Oh yeah, you haven't met Kitsune yet, have ya? Let's just say that Kitsune has a slight disliking to Konoha, Hawk said with a chuckle. Oh, fair enough. Another question though, Hawk? Sina asked. Hawk grunted. I've seen everyone here fight, but I've yet to see Kitsune fight. Is he really everything he's hyped up to be? Sina asked curiously. This time Loki answered. Sina, he's underhyped. That kid, as Hawk calls him, is probably the most powerful shinobi you'll ever meet. Loki said. Alright, back on track please. Quote. The 4 of them went back to planning for the war. It was 4 hours later Kitsune reappeared from his room. He moved to go and sit down but was interrupted by a knock on the door. He tilted his head at Loki, but the leader of the hunters merely shook his head and shrugged his shoulders. Sina walked over to the door and opened it. And you are? He growled. My name is Jiraiya of the Hidden Leaf, said first entrant to the inn. With me and Kiba Inuzuka and Sakura Haruno. Quote. Kitsune seemed to freeze then. He slowed, turned around, a massive wave of killer intent seeping through the room. What do you want? He growled. We are here to request assistance from the hunters in the upcoming war. Sakura said. We were hoping that. She was interrupted by a kunai that embedded in the door a few millimeters from her head. Kitsune stood there, the killer intent flowing from him. He flicked out another kunai and spun it round his finger. What makes you think we will help you? He growled before barging past and walking off. The 3 Konoha shinobi stood there speechless. Ignore him, he's just got a bit of a grudge against Konoha. I'll deal with that later. If he's ordered to, he will protect you. Loki said. Hawk, go and check that he doesn't leave a crater. Hawk nodded. Excusing himself, he squeezed past the Konoha ninja before going in search of Kitsune. Loki turned to them, gesturing for them to take a seat. Sina, Michu and Loki sat at one end of the table. Sakura, Jiraiya and Kiba sat at the other. Akamaru sat near the door as if he was keeping lookout. Firstly, we will help you in this war, we were planning on it anyways. Secondly, we will need, however, a base of operation. We were hoping to set up within Konoha itself. Is this acceptable? Loki asked. Jiraiya nodded. Thirdly, we want to test the strengths of your Jonin and Chunin. We figured the best way to do this is a tournament-styled event. Now I know you may have issues due to it will leave you open to attack. We have covered this within our plan. To cover this event, we will be calling back 2 of our high-level operatives within the Akatsuki. This will cause disruption and weaken the Northern Alliance. Is this acceptable? Loki said. I think it is, however we will need to know who your 2 operatives are? Jiraiya inquired. Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki. Loki said, watching for their response. Those 2, are you serious? Kiba cried out. Deadly serious, boy. How do you think we managed to keep them under watch so long? Michu answered. Do we have terms then? Loki asked. We do, Sakura said. Suddenly a brilliant white light filled the room. The 3 Konoha ninja were on their feet instantly. The 3 hunters stayed sitting down. Sinna was grinning like a madman. The light faded as fast as it came. There's gonna be a crater now, Michu sighed. Sinna, go check Hawk is still alive for us. The hell was that? Sakura cried. That, my young kunoichi is Kitsune letting loose a small portion of his anger. Loki said with a slight smile. Now we shall meet you within a week with our operatives. Excellent, now I recommend you leave before Kitsune gets back. The 3 Konoha ninja fled faster than they had ever moved before. Hawk stood there, watching his old student obliterate the nearby landscape. Sadness filled him, then realizing at last what Kitsune went through. No amount of training and moving on could heal those kinds of wounds. They were wounds that cut deep into a person's being, their soul could be crushed. Kid, you can't let your emotions get the best of you. Hawk said. Separate your feelings in your heart from your brain. When they too get involved, it ruins you. Hawk, don't. Kitsune said, his voice barely a whisper. Kid, I know it was rough, but you gotta move on. Hawk said, walking over and patting Kitsune's shoulder. No, Hawk, you don't. You know that when I was 5, villagers kidnapped me. They kept me in a cell under a house for 2 whole months, no food and no water. I was barely alive. That's just the start. Kitsune, don't give me that crap. Okay. Hawk stared at him sadly. He knew it was bad, but that bad? Kid, just keep the emotions in check until we win this, okay? Hawk sighed. Kitsune merely nodded, all of his energy leaving him. Hawk glanced at his, realizing tears were falling down his cheeks. Hawk rushed forwards, grabbing Kitsune as the man fell forwards. He caught him on his shoulder. He heard racked sobs coming from his old student. Rain started to patter down, slowly becoming a downpour. The 2 men stood there, with only rain and tears for company. The 3 hunters looked up as Hawk and Kitsune returned. They didn't need to ask questions. They knew how Kitsune felt, and as his friends and teammates they didn't need to pry. He simply nodded and accepted him. Alright guys, listen up. The plan is simple. We meet up with Itachi and Kisame at the border for the Fire Country. From there we will advance on Konoha. Once inside we will split into 2 teams. Team 1 will be stationed inside Konoha helping build defenses. This team will consist of Hawk as team leader along with Kitsune, Itachi and Kisame. Team 2 will be recon and advanced assaults with myself, Sinna and Michu. These will be the teams. Every 3 months we will swap, allowing for rest and recovery. Loki said. The team stationed at Konoha will also be on alert to move and support Suna if need be. Any questions? They 4 other hunters shook their heads. Loki smiled. Let's roll out then. Quote, it took all of a few minutes for the 5 hunters to be ready. They only ever packed lightly as they kept anything they needed inside storage scrolls. Rumor had it that Michu kept a small house in one of hers, yet no one could confirm that. When they were ready they all nodded to Loki. The latter smiled and leapt off towards the meeting point with the other hunters in tow. It took all of an hour to reach the border of the Fire Country from their base deep in the land of rivers. They had made double time to get there, and everyone but Kitsune was showing signs of exhaustion. A trip that usually takes 3 hours done in 1 usually does that to you. Alright, we are here, let's, Loki began before he was cut off by loud explosions. The hell was that? His question was soon answered by 2 men leaping out of a nearby bush. Itachi and Kisame sprinted out of the bush, landing in front of the 5 hunters. The pair looked like they had been dragged through hell and back. Itachi's cloak was barely there due to most of it being burnt off, and Kisame had heavy cuts over his torso. The hell happened to you too? Sina exclaimed. Large group of Iwa shinobi chasing us, along with Deidara. Several squads of Anbu, Itachi said breathlessly. Probably 100 chunin or higher shinobi. Alright, Kitsune, go hold them up whilst we get support. Let's move, Loki said. Kitsune nodded and turned to the way that Itachi and Kisame had come from. He rolled his shoulders, loosening them for the upcoming fight. He took off his full-length trench coat, leaving him in black combat trousers, shirt and boots. He glanced around, realizing that even against 100 shinobi, in this landscape he could be beaten. Fire plume jutsu, he roared, flashing through the hand signs. A wave of fire burst out from him, like a pulse. The ring of flames surged out, burning away the vegetation around him. Everything for 50 meters was destroyed, leaving Kitsune standing alone in a burnt clearing. He heard movement to his left, instinctively ducking away. Several kunai burst from the trees, embedding themselves where he had just stood. Well, if it isn't young Kitsune. Member of the Hunters. Deidara said with a smile as he walked out. The rest of the Iwa shinobi followed suit, moving so Kitsune was surrounded. Deidara, Kitsune said with a smile. Still searching for a one true art? I heard Sasori's art is much better than yours. My art is explosive. Art is an explosion, not something that can be left for years. Deidara roared. Get over yourself, Kitsune said with a smile. Kitsune flashed through had signs before slamming his hands onto the ground. Earth movement jutsu. Suddenly the earth underneath the Northern Alliance troops began to shift, splitting before firing dozens of shinobi upwards. Several of the northern ninja who were Jonin or Anbu managed to get out of the jutsu's range. However, Kitsune wasn't finished yet. Wind pulsation jutsu. A massive wave of wind slammed into the remaining ninja off their feet. Deidara managed to dodge the wind wave by creating a clay owl and leaping onto that. The second pulsation fired out, slamming into the recovering ninja. This was followed by several more pulsations that destroyed the assault squad sent after Kisame and Itachi. Looks like you've succeeded, Deidara. Kitsune called to the bomber. Shut up, Kitsune. You haven't witnessed my art yet. Deidara roared. And it'll stay like that, bye. Kitsune vanished, using Flash Step to reappear next to the Hunters and Co. Problem dealt with. They won't be going anywhere anytime soon. He said, good work, now we are nearly at Konoha. Please behave, I don't want to see any craters or dead civilians. Got it? Loki said, directing this at Kitsune. A murmur of yeses came from the group. Loki nodded before leaping off towards Konoha. Now let's go meet as a Hokage. As the group neared the gates to Konoha, Kitsune felt a chakra spike. It was weird, he'd felt that sort of spike before and it was never good. Guy, go on ahead, I'm just going to. He was cut short by a kunai that thudded into his side. He dropped, hitting the ground with a thud. Kitsune, Sina cried. Get going, I'll deal with this. Tell the Hokage to seal the village. He roared. Kitsune pulled himself up and found himself face to face with 3 Kumo shinobi. The 3 were identical in everything, making it look like 2 were clones. The Kumo triplets. So they sent you as backup? Kitsune said, grinning under his face mask. The triplets decided to ignore his statement and got straight to work. The 3 pulled out identical katanas, forming a triangle around Kitsune. They leapt at him, forcing the young hunter to keep spinning so that he wouldn't get stabbed. However, the constant barrage of slashes took its toll on the hunter, as one swipe got through, cutting deep into his other side. With blood pouring from 2 wounds, Kitsune knew he would have to act fast. Ninjutsu was pointless as these 3 were famed for their ability to absorb it. He couldn't beat 3 in taijutsu or kenjutsu due to the numbers advantage. He had one option left. Genjutsu. Kitsune quickly spun, slamming his right boot into one of the triplets, forcing the ninja to stumble sideways. Now he had all 3 on one side of him. He could use one of his signature moves. Demon's Hell Jutsu. Kitsune cried. The 3 suddenly collapsed in pain. Inside their minds they would be going through 5 days of hell. What made the jutsu even more powerful was that any damage their bodies took inside the genjutsu would be mirrored outside. The 3 were quickly destroyed, as a minute in the surface world was a day in the Demon's Hell Jutsu. The triplets' bodies were quickly ripped apart, leaving Kitsune standing there. He doubled over moments later, coughing up blood. Got to get to a medic ASAP. He grunted. The young hunter pulled himself up and concentrated, trying to ignore his heavy wounds in his sides. He stepped away, appearing next to the other hunters. Whilst Kitsune was fighting, the remaining hunters sped quickly along the trees, arriving at the gates of Konoha. They seemed to appear out of the shadows for the Chunin squad on duty, scaring them half to death. "We are here to see the Hokage," Loki said. Sina, Michu and Hawk formed up, wearing the standard hunter attire. This consisted of pure black clothing, with a form of jacket that varied on the person. Itachi and Kisame had also changed into the hunter attire, however they kept their straw hats, deciding to stay hidden for now. "Follow me, sir," the Chunin mumbled. He led the group through the streets, heading towards the Hokage Tower. The group ignored the odd and scared faces of shinobi and townspeople alike. Itachi was interested, however, in the vast changes, noticing the walls were heavily reinforced with massive catapults and mounted crossbows. "Here we are, sir. Do you know the way inside?" the Chunin asked. "I'll deal with that, Konohamaru, you are dismissed," a voice called out. Itachi turned to the voice, surprised to see Kakashi Hitaki walking towards them. The copy ninja nodded to them before motioning for them to follow him. They soon reached the door to the Hokage's office. With a quick knock, Kakashi led them in. Tsunade sat there, flanked by Shizune and Jiraiya. The trio had barely changed from when Itachi had last snuck into the village. "Welcome, hunters and co. We are glad you all arrived safely," Tsunade said. "Thank you, Lady Hokage, but not all of our company is here yet. One of our group is engaging a trio outside the village. He will be here in a matter of moments," Loki said. "Shall we begin?" "Not quite yet, my advising group is yet to arrive," Tsunade said. As she spoke, the door opened and Sakura Haruno, Shikamaru Nara and Neji Hyuga walked in. The three nodded a welcome to the hunters. "Excellent, now firstly we must cover a few key rules. First I ask," Tsunade began. "Lady Hokage, can I ask you wait with the rules until our teammate arrives, then we'll probably apply the most to him," Hawk said with a grin. "Well, if you insist. Well, moving on, you will be accommodated within the hotel on the east side. We have arranged for 7 rooms, one for—" Again Tsunade was forced to stop. "My apologies, Lady Hokage, but we will only be needing 6 rooms," Hawk said. Tsunade had been about to question that request when a figure appeared in the room. A man dressed in pure black, with a trench coat and hood along with a face mask, was stood in the middle of the room. He grunted before doubling over. Blood trickled onto the floor from his sides. "Kitsune!" Michu cried. "He needs medical assistance now." "Oh, shut up, Michu, I'm fine." Kitsune grunted. "I'll be fine in a bit. Hunter, whilst you are in my village you are under my authority," Tsunade said. "I demand that you receive medical attention now." "Fine, but I'm staying here," Kitsune grumbled, before sitting on a chair in the corner. Tsunade motioned for Sakura to deal with it. The pink-haired Kunoichi walked over, kneeling before Kitsune. In a quick motion she cut through his shirt, pushing aside the trench coat. Immediately every woman, bar Michu, blushed heavily. The masked hunter had heavily defined abs, his chest was covered in toned muscle. "My god, he's so hot," Sakura thought as she went to work on his wounds. "Okay, now that's sorted, you will be given 6 rooms in our best hotel. You will be given exclusive usage of Training Ground 3 along with Konoha's Team 7. Tsunade said. "You will also be allowed full access of the village unaided. Any other requests? No? Good. Now for rules. Firstly, I ask that you behave whilst in Konoha, no fights or violent arguments. Secondly, any leave must go through myself or a senior Jonin. Clear?" The hunters nodded, bar the masked one. "Loki, I asked, are we clear? One of you hunters needs to agree to this," Tsunade said, containing her anger. "Kitsune, agree to it already." Hawk groaned. "Fine, whatever." Kitsune growled. "Are you done yet?" His last question was directed at Sakura. Not quite, I've still got," she mumbled, before being cut off by Shizune. "Lady Hokage, we have movements on the east side, a squad of Iwa bombers heading this way. They look like they are going to try and breach the east wall," Shizune said. "How many?" Tsunade demanded. "Just 4, probably to test our defenses," Shizune said. "Alright," Tsunade said. "Can I ask you deal with that?" She asked Loki. "I'll get squads out to check the area." Loki nodded. "Hawk, deal with it," he said to the battle-scarred ninja. "I'm coming as well," Kitsune said, pulling himself up. But you only just got healed up, you need to rest. Sakura protested. I'm fine. Kitsune growled, killer intent seeping from him. Sakura nodded, backing off quickly. She remembered how scary he could really be after their first meeting. Alright, you two deal with that. The rest of you head to the hotel and set up shop. Loki said, I'll stay here and help direct any movements. If it's all clear, I'll wait for Hawk and Kitsune and meet up with you. The remaining hunters and company left, leaving Kitsune, Hawk, Loki and the Konoha ninja. Meet you later, Hawk whispered to Loki, before him and Kitsune Flash stepped away. Why does he throw himself on the front line so much? Sakura asked Loki. Haha, it's probably due to Hawk. Hawk was his sensei for 3 years. He's kind of a tough egg. Kitsune is molded the same if not worse. They have this motto between them, if we can move our legs, we can swing our fists. Loki said with a smile. Trust me, those bombers won't know what hit them. In the distance they heard explosions followed by cries of agony. Kitsune and Hawk sped along the trees, leaping gracefully from branch to branch. To normal eye they would just be a blur. What's the plan, Hawk? Kitsune asked, studying the landscape and taking in every change. We go in hard and fast. We need to get you better medical attention whether we like it or not. I don't care what you say, it's happening. End of. Hawk said, with finality in his voice. Whatever, let's just end these guys and get on with it. Kitsune grumbled. The pair burst into a small clearing within the massive forest surrounding Konoha. They landed softly, it was as if they had teleported into the glade. Across from them stood 4 Iwa ninja from the bomber section. They seemed to be laying down some form of mines along with other heavy explosives. Well, what do we have here? Konoha only sent 2 shinobi against the best bomb squad in Iwa. The middle one, which Kitsune assumed was the leader, said. Kid, you take the ground. I'm going for an aerial assault. Hawk said. Wind lift jutsu. Air gathered beneath Hawk, firing him into the air. He shot about 20 feet into the air before coming to a halt. He looked like he was flying or walking on the air, but really he was just using chakra to create a solid object of condensed air beneath him. Earth movement jutsu. Kitsune roared. The earth exploded upwards in front of him. The Iwa shinobi were launched into the air, flying to the same height as Hawk. The mines and explosive traps that had been set were sent flying as well. Wind blade jutsu. Kitsune cried. He leapt forward, sweeping his hand in an arc. A huge semicircle of compressed razor-sharp wind chakra burst from his arm. It sailed towards the explosives, slicing most of them in half. They exploded mid-air, covering the area with thick smoke. Wind pulsation jutsu. He cried, sending massive waves of chakra outwards. The smoke was quickly cleared on the lower levels. This gave him time to set out one of his Master S-class jutsus. Up in the sky, Hawk was decimating 2 of the Iwa shinobi. Apparently they had been ex-students of the Tsuchikage and knew some elements of his flight technique. The other 2 had fallen back to the ground, knocked out temporarily. Hawk rushed forwards, pulling out his dual tantos and leaping forwards, ripping them into an X. The first Iwa ninja was ripped apart by this, blood-spraying Hawk. The second ninja had retreated far enough back to set a time bombs. He lobbed 6 explosive towards Hawk, who dodged the explosions. He moved in for the kill but was stopped by several massive earth pillars firing up and him. The 2 Iwa ninja who had been knocked out before had regained themselves and were firing at him. Hawk spotted Kitsune doing multiple hand signs at lightning pace. He recognized them as one of his purge jutsu. He quickly backed out, making it look like he was running. Haha, he's scared. We are so, he Iwa ninja started, but was stopped by a pillar of pure chakra slamming into his chest. Purging pillar beams jutsu. Kitsune roared. Massive pillars of light shot out from Kitsune, firing towards the remaining 2 Iwa bomber ninja. They tried to run, but the pillars followed them like homing missiles. They were quickly ripped apart by the force of pure chakra. Tsunade glanced up as she saw pillars of light flowing around, winding and bending from the forest. What the hell is that? She turned to Loki. Pillars from the forest? Loki was stretched out on the couch in the Hokage's office. He grunted, barely looking up. White or red? He asked. White, Tsunade said. Good, was all Loki said, before he closed his dazzling green eyes. Would there be a problem if it was red? Tsunade asked curiously. HMPH, if it was red you wouldn't have a forest left. Loki grinned. Oh, Tsunade said in a small voice. Kitsune stood, surveying the battlefield. Parts of the bomber squad lay everywhere, blood was running down the trees. He nodded, glancing up as he saw Hawk lowering himself. I think we overdid it again, kid. Hawk chuckled. Kitsune grunted, glancing at the stocky ninja. Ya think, he said with a small laugh. Right now that's done, let's get back and report. Then you are going to the hospital, Hawk said. Kitsune shot daggers at his friend before sighing. He knew he couldn't argue against his best friend. Fine, let's go. The pair nodded and Flash stepped. They appeared in the Hokage's office, causing yelps from Shizune and Sakura. Mission complete, Lady Hokage. Kitsune said, virtually growling the last part. Tsunade blinked at the poorly covered anger. Excellent, are there any other threats? She asked. None we could sense or see. Hawk responded. I'll expect a written report by the end of the day, Tsunade said. You are dismissed. Excuse me, Lady Hokage, but my friend here needs more medical assistance even if he doesn't think so. The blades that cut him earlier had lethal doses of poison even though he denies it. Could you do some quick checks for me? Hawk requested, flashing a grin at Kitsune. If looks could kill, Hawk would be in pieces on the floor. Certainly. Sakura, could you accompany me please? Tsunade said, turning to her pink-haired apprentice. The young kunoichi nodded, motioning for Kitsune to follow them. He grunted before following, not before turning and glaring at Hawk. Have fun, kid. Hawk laughed. Kitsune was shown into a hospital room. It was clean and of a higher quality than every other village he'd seen. Could you lie down on the bed for us? Sakura asked, smiling at the masked hunter. HMPH. Kitsune sighed, pulling himself on the bed. Tsunade nodded to Sakura, her apprentice moved forwards. She frowned at her patient. You are going to need to remove that. She pointed at his shirt. Just cut it open, I'm not bothered. He said, trying to keep his identity covered. Okay then. Sakura mumbled. She moved forwards, quickly cutting through the shirt and moving the trenchcoat to the side. She was greeted by the defined abs she had seen in the Hokage's office. She turned a bright shade of red before looking at Tsunade. The Hokage too had a slight tinge of red on her cheeks. Okay, let's have a look at you. Sakura said, inspecting his sides. His right side was nearly fully healed from the wound he'd received from the kunai. His left side, however, was an issue. It was still bleeding from the reopened engagement. The red blood was mixed in with green liquid that was oozing from the wound. Sakura shook her head. How could he still stand with that coursing through him? She focused chakra into her hands, pressing them onto the wood, trying to draw the poison out. She frowned as her attempts seemed to be achieving nothing. Lady Tsunade, could you come and have a look at this please? Sakura asked. Tsunade walked over, crouching. She examined the wound. His face quickly darkened and she stood. She turned to Kitsune, frowning at him. We cannot heal you unless you release the genjutsu on yourself, she said. Kitsune sighed, glaring at the Hokage. He held up his right hand, raising 2 fingers. Release. He sighed. The genjutsu released, revealing his chest. The 2 women in front of him gasped. His chest was a web of scars, covering his upper torso. They could also see part of a scar hidden between his face mask and hood. His face was still heavily covered and Tsunade subtly trying to get a view as to what he was hiding. How are you still alive? Sakura cried. She was blushing deeply. His genjutsu had actually dulled down his abs and muscles. He was dawn hot, she thought. I just get on with it, wounds only hold you back, Kitsune said. Sakura shook her head and went to work, extracting the poison. So Kitsune, I'll take this time to ask you a few questions if that's okay? Tsunade asked. Actually Hokage, that is not okay. Kitsune growled. Killer intent began to fill the room. I'm here to get healed, not to answer your stupid questions. Got it? Tsunade and Sakura stared at the hunter in shock. Listen here, hunter. I don't care who you are. You do not talk to the Hokage of Konoha in that voice. Tsunade growled back at him. She could feel her anger rising. Kitsune didn't respond to her, instead turning his head to Sakura. Are you done yet? He asked, his fists clenching in anger. Yeah, I'm done, Sakura said, staring daggers at him. Good job, Sakura. Now Kitsune, I'll meet you in the hotel later. I have a request of your group. Inform Loki for me, Tsunade said. Kitsune grunted before flash stepping away. Tsunade turned to Sakura. What did you think of him? She asked the pink hair girl. Well, I can't believe he's alive. Some of those scars look nasty. She said thoughtfully. Yeah, he must be a tough son of a bitch to still be walking. Tsunade said. That means he's got experience. That will be useful in the teaching phase. Are you sure him and Itachi are the right people to be teaching the Jonin? Sakura asked. Surely him and that Hawk guy would be better? Hawk was Kitsune's sensei from what Loki told me. Maybe he would be better. Itachi could teach the Chunin with that Kisame guy. Tsunade said. Sasuke might not react well to Itachi either. I'll deal with that later. Sakura nodded and turned away, looking out the window to where she saw Kitsune deep in conversation with Itachi. Kitsune appeared outside the hospital. The sun was out and shining like usual in the fire country. He sighed, looking around him. Shopkeepers were selling their wares, people were just doing normal things. Many looked at him curiously or in fear. Underneath his mask he grinned. Kitsune. He heard a soft voice behind him. He turned grinning. Itachi. He said, you've been wounded again? Itachi asked. Not badly, just a little bit. Kitsune said with a chuckle. Shall we go for a walk? People are getting scared. I thought you liked that? It made you feel alive or something? Itachi asked with a chuckle as they headed off. Yeah, but Loki said we have to keep relations good. So I'll keep the killer intent down. Kitsune said. Anyway, what are you doing out here? I thought you were debriefing with Kisame and Loki? Oh, that reminds me, I have to go tell Loki the Hokage is going to call a meeting with him soon. We finished debriefing and Loki knows about the meeting. He had one of his summoning creatures listening in on the meeting. Itachi said matter-of-factly. Typical, shouldn't we be heading towards the palace then? She's coming to the hotel. We are using one of the large meeting rooms there until the main meeting complex has finished its repairs. Itachi informed him. So what does she? Kitsune was cut off by a shout. You. The pair turned to see the Konoha 11 walking behind them, heading for the hotel. Specifically Sasuke, who was now running towards Itachi with his Chidori ablaze. Itachi and Kitsune sighed, glancing at each other. Do you want to deal with this? Itachi asked. Gladly. Kitsune chuckled. Kitsune burst forwards, ducking under the swinging arm of Sasuke. He slammed a chakra-reinforced punch into Sasuke's gut, before pushing upwards with his other arm. His elbow caught Sasuke's Chidori arm, pushing it upwards. He then spun, swinging his leg into Sasuke's feet, sweeping the young Uchiha off his feet. He crashed into the ground as Kitsune stood. Listen here, Uchiha. I don't care who you are in terms of rank or power in this village. Attack my comrade and personal friend again and I'll end you? Got it? Kitsune roared, killer intent flowing off him. What is going on here? A voice called from the side. The group turned to see Lady Tsunade and the elders walking towards them. Tsunade looked very mad and this caused the Konoha 11 to back off slightly. Just a little misunderstanding, Lady Hokage. Itachi said, bowing. Tsunade noticed Sasuke lying on the ground and put two and two together. Ah, well everyone, I want you at the hotel in 2 minutes, so get moving now. She roared. The Konoha 11, knowing her rage, went speeding off without looking back. This left Kitsune and Itachi to take a leisurely stroll as the Hokage and the elders went walking off. The pair sighed. Let's see what Loki wants before the meeting, Kitsune said. Itachi nodded and the pair flash stepped into the hotel meeting room. They were quickly greeted by Loki and the rest of the hunters. Kitsune, good to see you, pup. Kisame cried, grinning. Fishy, good to see you. Kitsune chuckled. I told you don't call me fishy. Kisame roared. The rest of the hunters burst into laughter. They hadn't been together for several years and it was good to see that everyone got along well with each other. Loki coughed loudly, bringing everyone's attention back to the matter at hand. The Hokage is brining every Jonin along with the elders here. Between us we have decided the squads for the hunters and the stations. Myself, Michu, Kisame and Sinna will be taking control of the main front alongside the Case Cage and Southern Allied forces. This leaves Itachi, Kitsune and Hawk here. Hawk will be taking control from here. Whilst you three are here, it has been decided to take over training. Itachi, you will be training the Chunin here. Hawk and Kitsune, you will be training the Jonin. Any questions? Loki said. The group shook their heads. Right, Sinna, Michu and Kisame, go get everything we need for the trip to the border. I'll stay here for the announcement. The group nodded. Kisame and Sinna vanished, leaving Michu with the 4 other hunters. Kitsune, can I have a word with you? Michu asked. Kitsune nodded, studying the woman. Michu was an intelligent woman with an athletic fit build. She had long brown hair down to her mid-back. This was generally kept in a ponytail. She had features that looked like she was sent by the love goddess. She led him out of the room and up the stairs. He followed her, tilting his head slightly. They entered the room assigned to her. She immediately spun to face him. "You better be careful," she said. He stared blankly at her. "Kitsune, listen to me. I don't want you losing control and killing anyone we are allied to," she said. "I can't afford to lose you." She took a step towards him. "Michu, I'll be fine," he said, turning away and walking back out of the room. Michu sighed to herself. There were some men who just couldn't read women. Kitsune re-entered the meeting space to find it filled with jonin. He quickly located Itachi and Loki on the far side. He sighed, moving between the groups of jonin, ignoring the looks he was getting. "Have fun?" Itachi asked with a grin. "What the hell are you on about?" "She just wanted to make sure I didn't lose control," Kitsune said. "Anything else?" Itachi asked curiously, a sly grin on his face. "Nothing?" Kitsune said. "You really are an idiot." Itachi sighed before turning to Loki. "Where do you want us?" "Stay at the back off the room. Keep your hat on until I call you forwards," Loki said. The pair nodded, moving to the back of the room. This did not go unnoticed by the Konoha 11 and their Jonin senseis. "Are those two the hunters then? Itachi and Kitsune?" Kiba asked. "Yeah, it's Sasuke's brother and the one we heard about," Shino answered. "My bugs went crazy when he walked past. They probably aren't used to that much raw power." "Did you see those pillars from the forest earlier?" "Sakura, you said it was the masked guy, correct?" Tenten said. "Yeah, from what I could see they were raw chakra condensed." Sakura said. "That Loki guy asked if it was red or white chakra. Apparently white is better than red for the safety of the village. He said something about there being no forest if it was red." "How troublesome," Shikamaru said. "They are obviously powerful enough to be training us." "Training us?" Kiba asked. "Them? Haha. It makes sense, Kiba, they are probably Sanin Cage level. It's understandable that they would teach us. I hope they teach us with the powers of youth. If they are that strong they must be youthful." Guy cried. They do have that aura about them," Kakashi said thoughtfully. "An aura of youthfullness. Lee cried. "Lee, shush," Neji said. "Could I have you attention please?" Tsunade said, breaking up the group's easy banter. "We are here to discuss the new training reforms," Tsunade announced. "The Chunin will now be under the teaching of Itachi Uchiha. Now I know some of you still hold a hatred for him, but I need to inform you of several S-rank secrets. Firstly, he only committed the mass murder due to the Uchihas trying to perform a coup. For the good of the village and peace for the decades he killed his clan members." Sasuke stood there, his face white as a sheet of paper at the news. Itachi glanced at him, before removing his hat. "Secondly, the Jonin will now be training under Hawk of the Hunters. He will be teaching you advanced assault techniques. This is aimed to improve your skills and give you an upper hand against the Northern Jonin," Tsunade informed them. "Lastly, the Konoha 11 will be under the tutelage of the Hunter's Kitsune. As you are our brightest and best, he will be teaching you a variety of techniques and improving anything you are currently lacking." "Any questions? Is he really good enough to be teaching us?" Kiba called out. Tsunade had been about to answer, however Kitsune stepped forwards from the back. "I am more than qualified to teach you," he growled. "Defeating a couple of Iwa bombers doesn't qualify you," Kiba responded. "Fine, to prove it my skills and ability I will be taking all of the Konoha 11 on alone," Kitsune said. "I expect you on training ground 3 within 10 minutes. That is now our private training ground." Kitsune gave them one final glare before flash stepping away. The Konoha 11 glanced at each other before walking off to the training ground. Loki turned to Tsunade and grinned. "This is going to be very interesting." Kitsune stood there patiently awaiting the arrival of the Konoha 11. He had already sent out multiple shadow clones out to various locations around the training grounds to ambush the medical ninja, Sakura and Ino. He was deep in thought when he noticed them arrive. It seemed that the rest of the Jonin and the senior members had come with the hunters. He turned to face the Konoha 11, studying them. "The rules are simple. We fight until one team is unable to continue. The entire training ground is the area." "Any questions?" Kitsune said. "So all we have to do is beat you into a pulp?" Tenten asked. "You can try. I'll even give you a minute of preparation time," Kitsune said. The Konoha 11 nodded, before moving into a huddle. They looked to Shikamaru as he was the tactician. "This is what I've thought up so far. We need to take him out as fast as we can. He's clearly too powerful for a long battle. We would simply be crushed. We need to move hard and fast. We will divide into 3 groups. Group 1, holding. This group would attempt to hold him down while Group 2 moves in and attacks. This group will be myself, Shino and Tenten. Group 2, this group is the attack group made up of Kiba, Sasuke, Lee, Neji and Choji. Your role is to attack head-on and get him down whilst we hold him in place. Group 3 is medical team. He is going to take a few of us down. He's in top tier S rank shinobi, meaning that he's up there with that pain guy. If you are taken out, the medical team will make sure you can carry on. Hinata, Sakura and Ino will form this team," Shikamaru said. They all nodded at this. Their teamwork would beat the crap out of this guy. "Go," Shikamaru said. The Konoha 11 spilt off. The holding team burst off to the left, whilst the attacking team spread out behind them. The medical team moved back, taking over a small glade. Kitsune glanced up as he noticed this. Rolling his shoulders, he grinned. Summoning. Projectile jutsu. Tenten roared as she leapt out of a bush. Kitsune reacted, spinning. Earth wall jutsu. A wall of solid rock shot up. Behind it, Kitsune slammed his hand into the ground. Earth movement jutsu. The ground beneath Tenten started to split and rise like a miniature earthquake. She managed to leap out of its range, narrowly missing a boulder that shot past her face. Shadow possession jutsu. Shikamaru cried. He thought he had managed to sneak behind the user, relying on the ace weapon's mistress to distract him. He was mildly surprised when Kitsune spun to face him. Wind blade jutsu. Kitsune roared. He slashed his arms in an X motion. Arcs of razor-sharp wind shot towards the shadow user. Shikamaru was forced to retreat, breaking his jutsu midway. Troublesome, he muttered. He noticed, however, Shino's bugs crawling along the ground towards Kitsune. Thousands and thousands of them moving to eat Kitsune's chakra. Kitsune too had noticed this. "They are fireproof, aren't they?" he asked what seemed to be a bush. Shino walked out, tilting his head at Kitsune. "Well, I suppose I'll have to," he started. Earth slab crush jutsu. The earth beneath the army of bugs split into 2 massive slabs. Shino had to leap back to avoid being crushed, but watched in dismay as his army was destroyed. As the slabs connected, they sent a massive wave of dust into the air. He moved his hands up to wave it out of his face when a boot connected, smashing his glasses. Kitsune was there, following it up with a punch which sent the bug user into a tree, and he slid down it out cold. "1 down, 10 to go," he muttered. His eyebrow was raised as he felt a shadow latch onto his. So Shikamaru had sacrificed Shino for the good of the group. Ruthless intelligence on the battlefield. He liked it. He tried to move, testing the strength of the jutsu. Kitsune grinned as he realized he could quickly break it, but decided play along so to reveal the others' positions. He felt his limbs being pulled, and he was forced to walk into the clearing as his battle had lead him off slightly. "Group 2 go," Shikamaru called. He was straining now to hold the hunter in place. Group 2 shot from the trees, taking up a semicircle formation behind Shikamaru. The young tactician forced Kitsune to turn and face them. Behind him in the tree, Tenten was picking up a knocked-out Shino and was moving to leap towards the medical team. "Lee, Neji go," Shikamaru said. "Choji support them. Sasuke, Kiba flank him." Kitsune grinned under his face mask as Lee and Neji rushed towards him, moving left to right to try and confuse him. "Earth pillar jutsu," he whispered. Massive pillars of earth shot up between him and the Konoha 11. Neji and Lee were forced to split and head separate ways to avoid the sharp pillars. "Did he just do that without hand signs?" Kakashi asked, his single eye wide. "You'd be surprised what he can do without hand signs. He's trained to face visual users. Your Sharingan would be useless," Hawk said with pride. Kakashi and the other Jonin stared at the hunter. Wait, wasn't he under Shikamaru's jutsu? How is he moving? Kurenai said in shock. "It's not that strong, it's good against weak opponents, but Kitsune has faced much tougher opponents than Shikamaru." Hawk responded. Kitsune spun, grabbing Lee's incoming foot, spinning and slamming him into a nearby pillar. He ducked then to avoid a crushing blow from Neji. He rotated, sending his leg into the Hyuga, knocking him off his feet. He leapt upwards, then sending his knee into Neji. The young Hyuga coughed, blood spraying out. Kitsune moved to finish him but was interrupted by Lee, the young man forcing the hunter back with furious punches. Kitsune raised his eyebrow, one of the only visible facial areas, at how fast he had become. Kitsune grunted before going on the attack. He ducked under a palm, moving in low and punching Lee's stomach. The latter doubled over in pain, allowing Kitsune to swing a foot in a crushing blow, sending him flying into a recovering Neji. The pair flew off into the forest, thudding into a tree. Fire Phoenix Immortal technique. Kitsune was forced to leap backwards onto one of the many pillars now covering the battlefield. Dozens of small fireballs raced towards where he had been exploding on contact with the pillar. He felt the pillar shift and begin to topple. Kitsune leapt from pillar to pillar, avoid Sasuke, fire jutsu. Fang over fang. Kiba roared. He had taken the chance to attack what he thought was a distracted opponent. Instead, Kitsune spun and ducked. Time seemed to slow and he looked up to see Kiba's face in shock. Kiba and Akamaru went sailing into a nearby pillar. Kitsune leapt after them, landing in front of the partially knocked out ninja and Nindog. He picked up Kiba, shaking his head slowly. He turned and threw him like a small stone. The shinobi sailed into the way of the incoming fireballs, screaming. He dropped. Kitsune, however, didn't have time to recover and was forced to leap backwards to avoid Choji's massive hand. The Akamichi had grown to 4 times his original and now towered over Kitsune. Kitsune, however, quickly reacted. Earth Eruption Jutsu. The earth beneath Choji began to split. Suddenly massive waves of flames shot between the gap. Choji was roasted. Crying out in agony, he was forced back, shrinking to normal size. 5 down. Clones, let's go, he muttered. The 3 medical kunoichi watched the explosions off in the distance over the trees. They had taken up position on a glade several hundred feet away in an attempt to create a safe haven for any of the injured Konoha 11 members. They had already set up several traps in an attempt to slow Kitsune down if he attacked them. They glanced up sharply as they heard a rustle in the bushes. Sakura and Hinata were immediately up in arms waiting for their would-be attacker. Ino was set to use her mind swap jutsu. Easy there, it's me, Tenten, a voice called out. They girls relaxed as they saw Tenten stumble out of the shrubs, carrying a bleeding Shino over her shoulder. Oh my, what happened? Ino cried. That Kitsune dude absolutely destroyed him. He's taken out Choji and Kiba as well. Perhaps Lee and Neji too. He might have even beaten Shikamaru by now. Tenten said. Is he really that strong? Hinata said. Well, he's a top-tier S-rank shinobi in the bingo books, so I'd hope so. A voice said. The girls spun to see Kitsune walking out from the trees. Behind him several more began to emerge, slowing, creating a small semicircle. They stood there, leaning against trees or doing the same casual stance that Shikamaru used. You, how are you here so fast? Tenten exclaimed. Shadow clones, was all he said before all hell broke loose. Earth destruction just to. The earth yerped, firing the girls into the air. Tenten was shot upwards, losing grasp on Shino. The bug user was flung outwards, but a Kitsune clone leapt into the air, catching him. There are some of you I'm not actually trying to kill, he said as another clone caught Hinata, Ino and Tenten. Sakura, however, was not so lucky. She was battered around by massive slabs that seemed to rise upwards as she landed on the ground. This is pitiful, the main Kitsune clone said as the ones who had caught the others knocked them out. Sakura screamed as a slab slammed her, catching her leg awkwardly and breaking it. Kitsune sighed before stopping the jutsu and catching her. He shook his head in disgust at her broken form before him, and the clones walked off carrying the Konoha 11 medical team in their arms. Shikamaru slammed into the tree next to the watching Jonin, sliding down it and lying in a crumpled pile. Quickly Shizune rushed forwards and began to try to heal his wounds, which were gushing blood. The rest of the Jonin looked on in awe as Kitsune moved to face Sasuke. They were even more amazed when several Kitsune shadow clones arrived carrying Hinata, Sakura, Ino, Tenten and Shino over their shoulders, before dumping them onto the ground and vanishing into smoke. Well, if it isn't the Uchiha. Kitsune growled. I never expected you to be this good. Sasuke said honestly. You have barely begun to scratch the surface of what I can do. Kitsune said sharply. Haha, you can beat them, but trust me. I am probably one of the best in the village. Sasuke said, trying to hide his pride in that. However, to his shock, Kitsune rushed forward, slamming his fist into his face. The last thing he saw before he was sent flying back was a gloved fist. He sailed backwards, knocking down several trees in his path. Purge Oblivion, Kitsune began, roaring. 7 Shades Barrier Jutsu. Loki cried, cutting him off. Several massive glowing ropes rose out of the ground and fired towards Kitsune. They quickly wrapped around him and began to squeeze. Loki shrugged when the Jonin stared at him. He walked over to face Kitsune. "The hell do you think you are doing?" The masked hunter roared at Loki. "Kid, calm down," Loki said, his dark brown eyes staring at him. Kitsune growled before relaxing his body. He shook his head, and through his face mask and hood they could see red eyes piercing into the Konoha Jonin. Loki released the ropes and Kitsune stretched out. He then turned to Tsunade and practically snarled at her. "Tell your elite that when they wake up they have 1 day to recover. After that I expect them here again at 8 a.m. sharp. If any are late they will end up in the hospital." "Got it," he said. Tsunade nodded her head, still trying to get over what she had just seen. Kitsune gave one final glare at the Konoha Jonin and walked off. Loki sighed, shaking his head at the hunter. "Why did you stop him?" A voice came from behind Loki. Loki turned to see Kakashi Hitaki along with the other Jonin excitedly awaiting the answer. "If that shot hit Sasuke," Loki said, "his body parts would be raining down on us right about now." Hawk stood before the Hokage, elders and the council, which included all of the clan heads. Aburame, Akamichi, Hyuga, Inuzuka, Nara, and finally the Yamanaka clan. Along with them were Danzo, Homura, and Kaharu. They were all sat around a long table with Tsunade at the head. Hawk was opposite the Hokage at the far end of the table. "Lady Hokage, why have I been summoned before the Konoha Council?" Hawk asked suspiciously. "As the former sensei to Kitsune, we are requested that you inform us of not only his abilities but his background." Homura said. "You basically want all my information about Kitsune?" Hawk said with a sigh. "Look, I can tell you some things, however key information can only be handed out by Kitsune himself. It's not my place to say about his background, however I will tell you about his skills somewhat." The council nodded. That was fair enough. Kitsune came to me around 7 years ago. He was battered and bruised beyond recognition. After seeing his pain firsthand, I decided to train him. I stopped training him 4 years ago. I have seen him fight once since those 4 years ended. Hawk began. "His taijutsu is superb. He is about on par with your Master Might guy, maybe a little lower, but he is beyond anything the other hunters can touch. If they were to both remove their weights, then Kitsune would have the upper hand. Guy has 1,000 pounds of weights on him. Any normal user would be crushed, but Guy isn't normal. Kitsune has near enough 2,000 pounds of weights and he is lightning fast." Quote. The council exchanged worried glances at this. Guy was world-renowned for being one of the best, if not the best at taijutsu, could be beaten by an outsider. Ninjutsu-wise, Kitsune is the best. He can perform most of his jutsus without hand signs. He actually has complete mastery over all 5 elements, however his strongest elements are easily wind and earth. I would say that Kakashi Hitaki has nothing on his skill. Hawk said. Genjutsu-wise, well, let's just say I would not want to be on the receiving end of his genjutsu. He has a self-developed genjutsu called Demon Hell Jutsu, and I can only base what I've seen on it. From what it looks like, it sends the person under immense pain within their minds, like going through hell. The damage is then also taken in this world, which can rip apart a person easily. Hawk said. Kitsune also has mastery over a kind of jutsu style known as Purge. I have no information about this other than it is beyond powerful. However, Kitsune does have a weakness. Hawk said. The council all leaned forwards, determined not to miss what Hawk had to say. Kitsune's anger and sadness will get the better of him. He can lose control, and if so, I would either run or fight him. His anger fuels his jutsu and makes him stronger. But it makes him weaker as well. Listen to me, this kid has been through more pain than you can imagine. Hawk said. What about family and friends? Kaharu asked. Kitsune has no family alive, and his friends are few. He is particularly close to myself, Kisame, and Itachi, whilst be good friends with the other hunters. His contact network is huge and he is on good terms with several powerful people. Hawk said. You say about him having now a live family. What family did he have? Tsunade asked. I cannot discuss this. It is not my place. Hawk said sternly. Is this meeting complete? Danzo stood then, looking towards Tsunade. Tsunade, there are things that the council wish to discuss alone. Would you mind giving us some time? He said. Tsunade nodded and motioned for Hawk to leave with her. They exited through the doors as the council began its discussion. They walked in silence, going through the various corridors leading out of the palace. Lady Hokage, would you mind coming to the hospital? There is something you and the Konoha 11 need to hear. Hawk said softly. Tsunade nodded, studying him curiously. The man had put on a cold face as if the news he was about to break pained him deeply. The pair walked off, heading quickly to the hospital. Several minutes later they arrived. Tsunade led him through the hospital to the area assigned for the Konoha 11. They walked in to see the entire 11 sitting in a sort of circle. They quickly broke the various conversations upon seeing the Hokage and the middle-aged hunter. Konoha 11, Tsunade, Hawk said, if you would follow me. The Konoha 11 and Tsunade stood, following him to the massive window along the east side of the hospital. The window looked out over Training Ground 6. This was a basic taijutsu training ground with heavy wooden posts. In the center, currently working over one of these posts, was Kitsune. He was running through his taijutsu style, quickly gaining speed until he was a blur. I see he's still there. Hawk sighed. I have brought you here to tell you a little about your new mentor Kitsune. The Konoha 11 were immediately alert. Several of them leaned on chairs or tables as they watched Kitsune crush the post before moving on. Sakura particularly was feeling the effects of the beating. She had broken her left arm and right leg, along with various ribs. Kitsune arrived to me several years ago. I trained him for 3 years, teaching him everything I could. He went through hell but came out stronger. He progressively became too strong for even me to train him. He learned jutsu after jutsu, developing and editing them. After 2 years he became a hunter, an elite. He stayed with me for another year before leaving. Within 3 years he had nearly surpassed me as the top hunter. After that he disappeared. In his hunter year he had carried out 124 missions, all S rank or higher. His reputation was world-renowned. He became known as Kitsune, the demon of the hunters. But suddenly he vanished. For 2 years we heard nothing from him. Not one message. Several high-ranking missing ninja whom we had been searching for turned up at our base dead, but other than that nothing. I soon learned that during those 2 years he had found himself a wife. A civilian from Tanzaku quarters. He had married her and together they had a baby girl. Hawk said, smiling at the memories of meeting his goddaughter. But alas, his happiness that he had spent his whole life trying to find was shattered. Together he and his family had settled in the south of the land of Earth. They had lived there for 2 years with their little family when a group of 80 Iwa ninjas came across them. Even though they presented no danger, the Iwa ninja attacked. They destroyed the house and kidnapped Kitsune's wife and child whilst he was fighting off 70 of the ninja. He quickly massacred them before giving chase. It took him weeks before he found them. They had stopped off at a large village bordering with the land that the Hidden Rain controlled. They had given the wife to Pain for one of his bodies. Kitsune arrived as they were making the transfer, and what he saw horrified even the most hardened warrior like Kitsune. Hawk said sadly, staring out at the man whose life had been hell. His wife had been decapitated and ripped apart like they were wild animals. His child was lying dead at her feet. Pain had taken her body for himself and made her one of the paths. Then he had killed the child before her, forcing her to do it. Kitsune quickly rescued his daughter's body, sending her away with one of his clones. It was then that Pain engaged him with his wife's body. Kitsune saw this and was filled with rage, hatred and sadness. Every emotion of pain and rage that throughout his life that had built up was released right then and there. He wiped that village off the face of the earth in a matter of seconds. Pain managed to escape with her body, but the 200 Iwa ninja and their families were not so lucky. That was the price for ripping the only happiness Kitsune had in his life from him. Hawk, pain filling his voice. Kitsune took the next week building a grave for his child. Currently she is buried within the land of fire in a place where only myself and Kitsune know. I only knew my godchild for a matter of weeks before she was ripped from my life. I share Kitsune's hatred, however I can control mine. You see, since he was a child Kitsune was hated, he was beaten and abused. Even as he grew up he was hated and his only chance of being loved was taken. Since then, in the past year, Kitsune has trained beyond what a normal person could do. He created the Purge style, a style that is fueled by his anger and pain. The Jutsu style takes his emotions and turns into pure chakra. The more powerful the emotion, the more powerful the chakra. White is normal emotion, whilst red is pure anger, hatred or sadness. Red is a force of destruction that chooses his worst memories and imprints them into his mind permanently. The downside is that his worst memories are always at the front of his mind, and until he can find peace again, he will be filled with anger and hatred. Hawk explained. The Konoha 11 exchanged glances, each of them now looking on Kitsune in a new light. They had all been through pain and suffering, but to have something of that magnitude throughout his life was unimaginable. "Excuse me, Hawk sir," Lee said. "Yes?" Hawk responded sadly. "I would like to hear more about this wife of Kitsune's," Lee said. The rest of the Konoha 11 nodded in agreement. "Where do I begin?" Well, her name was Mika. Her parents were poor shop opens living in Tanzaku. They owned a small clothing shop that was being targeted by a local gang. Kitsune got rid of the gang and they offered a room for him. He quickly bonded with Mika as they had both been abused in their younger life. However, unlike him, she was filled with happiness. She brought out whatever good was left in him, and finally he found peace. She was what could be known as beautiful. She had dark red hair, along with bright blue eyes. Eyes a lot like Kitsune's. She was medium height, but when she was angry she could fill a room. Everything about her screamed happiness and love. Hawk said, smiling. "Thank you, Hawk," Tsunade said. "I'm sure we all see Kitsune in a new light now." The Konoha 11 nodded, watching as Kitsune increased his speed, yet they could hear his grunts of agony as he pushed his body beyond normal limits. "The other reason I gathered you here was tomorrow you are meeting him for your first training session, and I'm here to prepare you. He will train you with ruthlessness. He seems to hold something against this village, and he will push you beyond what you thought you could do. You will feel pain in places you thought you could feel pain. But you will come out stronger. You will be strong, but not as strong as him. Unless you have the drive and know what it is like to suffer, you will fail and be reduced to nothing. However, if you embrace his methods, you will become easily twice as powerful as before." Kitsune is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful shinobi alive. Hawk said, staring at them. "Do what he says and you will gain power you didn't know you had. Ignore him and you will be removed from his training and sent back." "Got it?" The Konoha 11 nodded, glancing at each other. They noticed it was dark outside and all began to move away, heading to each of their respective rooms. Sakura and Sasuke, however, stood looking out over the training ground. They noticed that Kitsune had vanished from the ground. Hawk and Tsunade too had left the room, heading back to their respective living areas. "We should go and talk to him," Sasuke said. Sakura nodded. The tale of Kitsune reminded them of an old teammate they missed dearly, and they wanted to just talk with Kitsune. They wanted to know the extent of his pain. The pair left, Sasuke supporting an injured Sakura. Sasuke himself was injured but put on a tough outer shell. His ribs were broken along with one of his shoulders. But he powered on to find Kitsune. Kitsune reminded him of his best friend, the man he missed the most. Naruto. The pair arrived at the hotel where the hunters were staying. Loki, Michu, Sina and Kisame had left earlier, heading off towards the front line. Sakura and Sasuke entered quickly, looking around. Kitsune was nowhere to be seen. "Have you seen Kitsune? He's a hunter and is completely covered in black along with a face mask and hood," Sakura asked the receptionist. "No such man has booked into this hotel. Every other hunter has, but we haven't seen him. He hasn't even brought in any of his stuff," the receptionist informed them. Sakura sighed, turning to Sasuke and shaking her head. The pair quickly headed off, checking every hotel around. Every single one gave them the same answer. However, when they asked at the front gate, they did get one good response. "We saw him heading into the forest on the eastern side," Katetsu said. "Thank you," Sakura said as she and Sasuke rushed off to find Kitsune. The pair quickly covered most of the forest before coming across a small clearing. In the middle stood a large tree covered in vines. On one of the highest branches sat Kitsune. Around the base of the tree several families of foxes sat huddled together asleep. Kitsune himself sat staring out through a gap in the trees at the dark sky. Stars glittered and shone throughout. On his lap lay a small fox, his tail wrapped around him like a blanket. It was a surprisingly peaceful scene. "What do you want?" Kitsune said, the beginnings of anger in his voice. We wanted to talk, Sasuke said, beginning to move forwards. Immediately the foxes around the trees perked up, moving in front of Sasuke. They blocked his approach. About what? Kitsune sighed. We heard about your wife and child. Sakura started. We wanted to. Look, I don't need your sympathy. I'm here because I was ordered to, not for your help. Kitsune said, cutting her off. Why are you not at the hotel? Sasuke asked. What's the point? Kitsune responded. Sakura and Sasuke glanced at each other. They could hear the sadness in his voice. It was sadness that only someone who had lost everything could have. It was the sadness that meant someone was barely getting through life. What do you mean? Why be here when you could be enjoying the comfort of a room? Surely you would want that after so long in the field? Sakura asked. You don't get it. There is not point as I don't sleep. Kitsune said. What? Everyone sleeps? You cannot live without sleeping? Sakura said, concern as a medic coming into her voice. Lack of sleep could have severe mental health issues. Do you not get it? Kitsune said sadly. I cannot sleep because of what comes when I do. It was then that Sasuke and Sakura noticed the teardrops falling from the branch. They took this moment to leave, with Sakura taking one final glance at Kitsune. She saw him look up at the stars before whispering two names. Mika, Kushina, he whispered as tears rolled down his cheek. Kitsune was still sat there the next day, staring out over the rising sun. The fox on his lap yawned, stretching out and flicking its tail. It looked up at Kitsune before moving in and nuzzling him. He sighed and picked it up, before stepping off the branch. He dropped down, landing softly. He then placed the fox on the ground and watched it scamper off. He glanced up at the sky, judging the time to be around 6 a.m. He quickly leapt off, heading towards the training ground, his trench coat fluttering out behind him. I didn't take Kitsune long to reach the training ground. He passed by small farming huts, taking the time to glance inside one to look at a clock. 6:23 a.m. He guessed he arrived around 6:30 a.m., but to check he called over a young boy who was passing. According to the young boy's watch, it was exactly 6:31. Kitsune nodded, handing the boy 10,000 ryo. He smiled slightly as the boy's eyes widened at such a sum. He sent him on his way before settling down to wait for his new students. They began to arrive at about 7:30. First came Shino and Neji, who stood a dozen meters away studying their new teacher. He was sitting against a post, his head down, making it look like he was asleep. Even his chakra was clocked, so he actually looked dead, Neji could see in his Byakugan. At 7:45 Lee, Shikamaru, Choji and Sasuke arrived. Hinata, Tenten, Ino and Sakura arrived at 7:55. At 8 a.m. Sakura glanced at her watch. Where the hell was Kiba? She watched as it ticked over into 8:01, then 8:02, 8:03 and finally 8:04 before Kiba and Akamaru arrived. He tried to sneak in, moving quickly into the waiting group. Kitsune's head snapped up, glancing sharply at Kiba. He stood up and began to stalk over to him, killer intent spreading out in waves, so Kiba and Akamaru quickly began to back off. I thought I said do not be late. He roared. He leapt forwards, driving a kick into Kiba's knee. The man cried out in pain as he dropped. Akamaru leapt forwards to defend his master but was beaten back by a punch which sent him flying. Kitsune walked over then, picking up Kiba by his hair. Ow, ow, Kiba cried, struggling. Did I not say don't be late? Kitsune roared into his face. Or did you not hear me? Answer me. I heard you. I heard arg. Kiba cried as a fist was driven into his face. Hey wait, Sasuke said, moving forwards. Suddenly a Kitsune clone appeared before him, blocking his path. Do not get involved, it said simply, sending out enough killer intent to make the remaining Konoha 11 back off quickly. Even Sasuke took a step back. Then why did you turn up 4 minutes late? Kitsune bellowed at Kiba, whose was lying on the floor broken. Kiba tried. This is a mission. You are not late for missions. Kitsune practically exploded on him. Kitsune's boot thudded into Kiba, sending him flying upwards. Kitsune then followed up with a devastating dropping elbow onto his stomach, causing blood to spray out of the dog master's mouth. Kiba dropped then, lying knocked out. His face was covered in blood. Kitsune turned away, staring down the remaining Konoha 11. Lee, take him to the hospital ASAP, get that mud as well. I expect you back here in 10 minutes or else. Kitsune snarled. Lee rushed forwards, picking up Kiba and Akamaru before leaping off like every tailed beast was chasing him. Kitsune watched him go before turning back to the Konoha 11. Listen up. I have been assigned to teach you, elite, Jonin, and increase your skills. I do not particularly want to do this. Actually, I would rather be on the front lines alone against the entire Northern Alliance that teach you lot. Let's be clear. I hate every single one of you with varying different levels of hate. I will not tolerate back chat, questions or disobedience. Any forms of those and you will end up like Kiba. Kitsune said, his anger barely contained. The Konoha 11 nodded quickly. Even those who hid their emotions well like Neji and Shino looked shaken up. Right to start, I want 600 push-ups before Lee returns. Anyone who doesn't manage that will be facing punishment later. Start. Kitsune said, summoning 10 clones to watch the 9 members left, with one waiting for Sasuke. Lee managed to return within his 10-minute time slot, arriving to see Sasuke, Neji, Sakura, Shikamaru, Ino, Choji and Shino finishing their push-ups. Hinata only managed 541 within that time. Kitsune unloaded on her upon hearing this. You call yourself a ninja and you can't even do 600 push-ups in 8 minutes. Kitsune yelled into her face. You're pathetic. Hinata rushed backwards at the pure hate in his voice, her already low confidence being crushed. Right you lot, I want you running up that mountain carrying these. He said, handing each of them 700-pound weights. Lee, you will be using these as you are already at 700. He instead handed Lee 900-pound weights. The Konoha 11 minus Kiba stared at him. They were all having issues with these weights, but 900 pounds was insane. Now everyone up that mountain over there and back within 1 hour. Anybody who is late will be facing punishment with Hinata later. Move it, he bellowed, sending the Konoha 11 sprinting away. Right now, time for some training, he muttered. Tsunade had been showing Hawk and Itachi round the hospital with Shizune when Kiba had been brought in. She had spun around to see Lee coming sprinting in like the devil itself was chasing him. Lady Hokage, Kiba needs medical attention now, he cried, dumping Kiba onto the nearest free bed. Gotta go. Wait, Lee, she bellowed, causing him to freeze in his tracks. What in Kami happened here? Kitsune said to meet him at the training ground at 8 a.m. or we would end up here, and Kiba was 4 minutes late. Also, if I don't get back in time then I'll be here soon. Lee said, turning and sprinting off. I guess he must be scared shitless of Kitsune. Hawk said, Shizune, deal with this. I want him back up and running as soon as possible. Tsunade said to her assistant. I'm paying this Kitsune a visit. Hawk will accompany you, Lady Hokage. I am needed elsewhere, Itachi said, vanishing with a poof. Lead the way, Lady Hokage, Hawk said with a sigh. He followed an enraged Hokage to the training ground. At least the argument would be interesting. Kitsune halted in his taijutsu training to see the Hokage and Hawk walking towards him. Well, the Hokage was more storming, but he didn't really pay attention before turning back to his training. What the hell? Why is Kiba in the hospital? She exclaimed as she neared him. He was late, Kitsune said simply. Yes, but I didn't expect him to be beaten for it, she said. I warned him, did I not? Kitsune said. They could hear the rising of anger in his voice. Well, she muttered, but Kiba is a high-ranking Jonin, he cannot be lying in the hospital again within 2 days. Do you want me to strengthen them or babysit them? Kitsune said, his voice lowered and the killer intent seeping out of him. He turned, delivering one final crushing kick to the tree, snapping it clean in half. Hokage, within 4 days you are heading to the front lines to assess the damage. Myself and this lot will be accompanying you. They will not get stronger without witnessing the violence of the front line. Kitsune said, turning away as if the conversation was finished. Fine, but I am also brining Kakashi and Guy as my personal guards. Hawk too will be coming, Tsunade said, turning to Hawk, who simply nodded. You will also be coming, Kitsune. The masked hunter merely nodded before turning to the arriving Konoha 11. Lee arrived with Sasuke within 30 minutes. Not bad. The Hokage left then with Hawk to plan the training teams. 7 minutes later, Neji, Shino and Shikamaru arrived with Choji a minute behind. The rest arrived within the hour, meaning everyone passed. Well done, you all pass. Now in the next 4 days we will be heading to the front line with the Hokage and her personal guard. Until then you will be driven to points where you cannot bear it anymore. Now everyone but Hinata start doing 1000 push-ups now, he said. Hinata, come over here. The Konoha 11 glanced at each other. They could feel the barely contained anger within his voice. Hinata shuffled forwards nervously. You are going to spar with me. Full force, Kitsune said. But she managed before she was sent flying back. Kitsune stood there where she had been, his fist had connected with her face. He quickly leapt forward, swinging his leg round and brining it, crashing down onto where Hinata was lying. It connected with her stomach, sending blood spraying. She cried out in pain as she felt her ribs crack. Kitsune shook his head in amazement. Hyuga, most powerful clan, my ass. He sighed. He spun as he heard a roar behind him. Neji was leaping forwards to deliver a killing blow, but he ended up hitting nothing. Kitsune had flickered out of vision. He appeared behind Neji. You do not interfere, he roared into Neji's ear. He sent a devastating right hook into Neji and the Hyuga went flying. Neji thudded down next, Hinata groaning in pain. Kitsune turned to the remaining Konoha 11, walking slowly towards them. Training is over today. Tomorrow who can walk is expected here at 5 a.m. sharp. Not a second later, Kitsune said, tomorrow the teams will be changed. Each team is for a different purpose, but that makes you unbalanced. The only currently unbalanced team is the Ino Shikacho. The rest of you will be separated and moved into teams that suit you. Each team will be divided into equal combat teams. There will be no tracking or hiding or any crap like that. Now get out of my sight, Kitsune said, vanishing. This is troublesome, was all Shikamaru said. The others nodded before moving over to pick up Neji and Hinata. Sasuke, however, stood aside, staring at where Kitsune had been. Over the next 4 days, Kitsune ran them almost into the ground. They trained for 14 hours a day, barely having any sleeping time, so each day they became even more shattered. However, they could feel themselves becoming stronger. The teams were also rearranged like Kitsune promised. He surprised them all by saying that there would be no teams at all, having changed his mind. They were apparently one big team. When they asked the Hokage, she informed them it was her choice, as he had told her he wanted them all unranked down to Chunin. She had flipped this and told him where to stuff it, which was the apparent reason for the massive hole in her wall. Not by Suande, but caused by his anger at her choice. He had also worked on each of their areas, developing them so they could fight long, mid and close range. He worked on their ninjutsu and taijutsu so they were actually proper well-rounded jonins. He did not, however, work genjutsu at all, despite Tsunade asking him to. They became a lot faster, reaching levels he expected, but they were still way behind him, apart from Sasuke. Sasuke was nearing his level as he had already been strong. Sasuke was fast and could copy his ninjutsu and taijutsu styles. He still had his purge style and genjutsu, so Kitsune didn't really fear him. On the day that they were meant to head out, the party had gathered by the main gate. Tsunade was there along with Hawk and her 2 bodyguards, Kakashi and Guy. The entire Konoha 11 was gathered after they had all recovered from Kitsune's beatings. They were well prepared and ready to move when they noticed Iruka walking towards them. Yo Iruka, what brings you by? Kakashi asked. He's actually here to replace Shizune, as she is standing Hokage till I return. Tsunade explained. Fair enough, are we ready to go then, Lady Hokage? Kakashi said, shrugging. Not quite, we are missing Kitsune. Tsunade said, glancing at Hawk. The hunter veteran simply shrugged. He had no idea where Kitsune was. Suddenly a little fox ran out from a building, climbing up his trousers and jacket to his shoulder. It nuzzled him, seeming to say something in his ear before heading off. Hawk nodded, turning to Tsunade. Kitsune says move out, he will catch up. He's going to travel behind us when we move, so if we are attacked he's a surprise. Hawk said, fine, but I want Sakura and Lee with him. They too will be useful in a surprise attack. Tsunade said, alright, but he won't like it. We will sort that out at our first camp tonight, as we won't find him now. Hawk said simply, let's move. The group of Konoha shinobi shot off, heading towards the Valley of the End. The group decided to call it a night after 7 hours of traveling. They quickly sat down in a clearing, all of them exhausted apart from Hawk. He was merely panting lightly, causing Guy and Lee to exclaim about his youthfulness. Within a few moments Kitsune joined them, moving out of the shadows like a wraith in the night. Ino yelped as she saw him emerge, causing several Konoha ninja to curse her. Kiba, however, cursed him instead, causing the hunter to glance at him with a small amount of killer intent. just enough to make Kiba nervous. Okay, Lee and Guy go look for firewood. Neji, Sasuke and Hinata go set some traps. Tenten, I want a perimeter check. The rest of us will set up camp and get the area ready to bed down for a couple of days. Tsunade said. Why a couple of days? Ino said. The cage has agreed to meet us here instead of further up. Tsunade said. Kitsune turned suddenly, moving towards the direction of Suna. I shall go meet him. He said. Oh no you don't. No one leaves this clearing until he arrives. Tsunade said with a smirk. We are going to do some team bonding. They all heard Lee and Guy shout about the youthfulness of wood gathering, causing several of the Konoha ninja to laugh. This couldn't be that bad and it would help relax them. No, what was that? Tsunade exclaimed, turning to see Kitsune walking away. I said no, I will take part in no such thing. Kitsune said, and with that leapt upwards and perched himself on a tree. Tsunade moved towards him but was blocked by Hawk. Just leave it, he said, shaking his head. Don't push him. Tsunade growled angrily, something about annoying hunters, before pulling out a bottle of sake. Fine, get the camp set up and we can start, Tsunade said. 4 hours later, the group were sitting around the fire in good spirits. They had almost all taken turns telling everyone about themselves, causing laughter and sadness. Even the usually stoic Shino and Neji had joined in, and after some persuasion Hawk too. They each took turns telling everyone about themselves, covering things from age to favorite book etc. Hawk, it's your turn. You're the second from last, Tenten said. For some reason she was unusually happy. Neji and Lee glanced at each other before glaring at Kiba. They were certain he had slipped some sake into her drink. Well, I'm probably the last since he won't get involved, Hawk said, pointing at Kitsune, who was sitting on a high-up branch staring at the stars. So let's get this started. The Konoha ninja, even Kakashi and Sasuke, leant forwards to hear what they could about a hunter, since their lives were spent being elusive. My name is Hawk Uzune. I am currently 37 years old, born in a small village within the Land of Fire. When I was 5, my village was ransacked by bandits and completely wiped out. My entire family and friends were killed within a day. However, I managed to survive and move on. I joined the Fire Temple shortly after as a monk, training there until I was 16. I promptly left and became a mercenary for 4 years before I met Loki. Together we formed the Hunters, which operated for several years before we grew. We gained Michu, then shortly after we gained Kitsune, who I had been training for 3 years. Within the past 3 years we lost Kitsune briefly and gained Senna. Then we regained Kitsune. We also met Itachi and Kisame about 5 years ago and they joined our ranks, Hawk said, concluding his story. There was a snort from the tree above them and they looked up to see Kitsune staring down at them. You would do well to not tell them too much about us, Hawk, Kitsune said. This lot cannot be trusted. What do they know? They know how we met, but apart from that nothing else, Hawk sighed. Now get your ass down here and join in. Kitsune stared blankly at him, before going back to stare at the stars. Kitsune, Hawk said, staring at him. Fine, Kitsune said, dropping down gracefully and leaning against the tree he had been on. My name is Kitsune. I have no last name as I disowned my parents. I am 22 years old, he said. This caused several glances around. The Konoha 11 were being taught by someone barely older than them. Tsunade, Kakashi and Guy were more amazed that this guy was this powerful at 22 years old. I was born within the Fire Country. I was hated as a child, betrayed by everyone and became a missing ninja at the age of around like 15-ish. Hawk was my sensei when I was 15 and quickly became my second best sensei. After 4 years I went missing before rejoining a year ago. The end, Kitsune said, turning to jump back up to his tree. Excuse me, Kitsune, Ino said. You never told us about your family? You had a wife and child from what Hawk told us. Kitsune spun on Hawk and began to advance on him. Killer intent poured into the clearing, radiating from Kitsune. You told them about that, he roared. You have no right to tell them of all people. Kitsune leapt forwards, grabbing Hawk's neck and slamming him into a nearby tree. He lifted Hawk upwards, leaning in close to his old mentor. Care to explain, Sensei? Kitsune growled. They needed to understand you, Hawk said simply. Kitsune growled, throwing Hawk across the clearing to where he had been sitting before. I'm going for a walk, he said. Don't follow me. Kitsune stalked out of the clear, merging into the darkness. Well, at least he didn't try to impale me. Hawk chuckled. A kunai came sailing out of the darkness. Hawk caught it quickly, laughing. He smiled at the group before they all fell back into the easy banter they had been in before. This lasted for several minutes before there was a deafening explosions that shook the earth from the direction in which Kitsune had walked. They were all on their feet immediately, however even thought they were on guard. What happened next shocked them to their core. Kitsune came flying from the darkness, flipping through the air. He bounced off the ground before being launched upwards head over heels. He crashed into a tree, ripping it from his roots. He slid down it before slumping to the floor. The Konoha ninja and Hawk stared at Kitsune. His trench coat was half burnt and barely hanging on him. They could see several large open wounds across his bare chest, as his shirt had been completely burnt off him. His trousers were covered in holes, but what was worst was his hood had been ripped off, revealing a large bandana. His face mask was still on, so all they could see were strands of bright golden blonde hair hanging from below his bandana. "So boy, I see you haven't improved," a man said as they stepped out. He was medium height and had a muscular tone. His bright orange hair was spiky and stuck up. His cloak bellowed out behind him, a cloak which was covered in red and white clouds. "Pain," Tsunade gasped. Behind her there was a loud groan as Kitsune pulled himself up. He staggered slightly but managed to stay on his feet. The Konoha 11 quickly took up positions before him, a small semicircle. Behind them stood Kakashi and Guy. Tsunade, after overcoming her shock, turned to heal Kitsune but found him missing. Hawk too was gone. "Where the hell did," she began. She was interrupted by a wave of pure wind chakra that smashed Pain off his feet. Pain was thrown into the air before another blast of wind chakra slammed into his side, sending him spinning. "Now Hawk," Kitsune roared as he raced towards Pain, who was recovering from slamming into a tree. Hawk came spinning through the air, leaping from tree to tree. He appeared in front of Pain and sent his right fist crunching into Pain's face. Pain went head over heels into Kitsune's foot. The latter sent a devastating spinning kick which would have killed a normal man. Pain went flying again, hitting the ground hard. Hawk and Kitsune moved in again, in perfect sync, but Pain attacked before they got the chance. "Almighty push," he bellowed. The two hunters went sailing backwards through the air, rising a good 40 feet above the tree line before beginning to drop. "Now Hawk, maneuver 7, Kitsune said. Hawk nodded before activating his Kekkei Genkei, feeling the wind shift and become more dense around him. He quickly righted himself, making it look like he was floating when he was merely walking on the air. Hawk spun, grabbing Kitsune and quickly flinging him towards Pain. Kitsune quickly ran through several hand signs before a massive ball of pure fire shot from his mouth. "Grand Firebomb Jutsu," he cried. The firebomb spun towards Pain. The jutsu was an S-rank jutsu, however Kitsune was merely using it as a diversion to get close enough for a taijutsu move. Pain, however, swayed right through it. "Almighty pull," he bellowed. Kitsune felt himself being plucked out of the air, sailing towards Pain. The orange-haired god caught him in his hand, before raising him and slamming him into the ground. Kitsune grunted before suddenly popping into smoke. Pain growled at the shadow clone before a boot connected with his jaw, sending him flying towards the giant flamebomb. He connected with it in an explosion of heat. Kitsune began to form more hand seals before a fist connected with his face. Asura Pain was there, sending his fist crunching into Kitsune's face, which caused him to fly several feet before hitting a tree. "Kitsune!" Hawk cried before he too was plucked out of the air by Preta Pain. Hawk and the Preta Pain dropped from the air, crashing into the ground in a flurry of smoke. Inside the smoke cloud, Hawk quickly formed some hand signs. "Wind pulsation jutsu," he cried. A massive wave of wind erupted from where he was standing, sending the Preta Pain flying back from where it had been standing. Diva Pain, however, withstood the blast before uttering his immortal jutsu. "Almighty push," he commanded. Hawk felt himself being lifted off the ground before the sensation of flight took over. As his Kekkei Genkei allowed flight, he was used to it, but this was different. This was a new feeling. His body suddenly lurched and he felt a thud into his back. He gasped before looking down. From his stomach was a thick branch, blood pouring from the wound. "Almighty pull." Hawk suddenly was pulled from the branch, a gaping hole left in his stomach. He flew towards Pain limply before dropping before the god himself. He thudded to the ground, lying in a heap before Pain. Such perseverance, such power, such pain, Pain said as he looked down on Hawk. Almighty. Pain suddenly lurched and the ground below him started to shift before being ripped upwards. He stumbled backwards before he was sent flying as a massive slab of earth lifted upwards. You have no right to complain about Pain. Kitsune roared as he leapt forwards. Kitsune flew forwards throwing his fist directly into Diva Pain's face. Pain's face crumpled from the force and he broke the sound barrier when he flew backwards. A massive wave of air was sent outwards from the connected causing the Konoha ninja to fly backwards. Hawk, are you okay? Kitsune asked as he eyed Pain's body on the ground several hundred feet away. I'm fine. I can move my legs so I can swing my fist. Hawk said with a grin as he stood. Hawk stood roughly, but managed to straighten his back. He was covered in cuts and still had a gaping hole in his stomach, but he was ready. The pair nodded at each other before leaping forwards, breaking the sound barrier. The Konoha ninja watched in shock as the pair burst forwards. Pain had just stood up when Hawk hit him in the face, sending the orange-haired god flying backwards. Kitsune had managed to get behind him in a burst of speed and caught the man with a spinning kick, enhanced with the speed of which Pain was flying at. The kick hit Pain in the head, sending him face-plating towards the ground. He hit the ground momentarily before being lifted upwards. Earth Pillar Jutsu. Kitsune bellowed. Pain was thrown into the air towards Hawk, who had taken flight. Pain gasped as Hawk slammed a foot into his back, breaking several bones before sending the orange-haired man into the ground. Kitsune, however, met him with a destructive punch into his chest, breaking several ribs of Pain's body. The Konoha ninja watched in awe as these two men systematically picked apart the most powerful shinobi alive. Their teamwork was godly, like they were joined in actions and mind. Not even Guy and Kakashi had this level of teamwork. Kitsune spun, sending an elbow into Pain, who stumbled backwards, before jumping forwards onto his hands and sending his heels into Pain's face, breaking his nose and several of the black pillars in his face. Kitsune bounced off his hands and spun mid-air, forming several different hand signs. Wind Burst Jutsu. From Kitsune, wind exploded outwards, sending Pain flying backwards into a tree. The jutsu was a low-level space creation jutsu designed by Hawk. It allowed Kitsune space to create his more powerful jutsu. Wind Arc Jutsu. Kitsune sliced his hand downwards, sending a huge wave of razor-sharp air towards Pain. Under his face mask he grinned. Suddenly his arc vanished and before him stood another orange-haired man. Preta Pain stood before him, sucking in his blast of air. Almighty push. Pain roared. Kitsune was sent flying away, crashing through several trees before landing before the Konoha ninja in a heap. His bandana was ripped, revealing spiky golden blonde hair. His face mask was still intact, hiding his face from view. He didn't move, which caused Tsunade and Sakura to rush forwards before they were intercepted. Asura Pain quickly rushed forwards, blocking them and engaging in combat. The rest of the Konoha ninja moved forwards to help but were sent flying back with an almighty push. Pain began to walk forwards towards Kitsune when fist connected with his face. He stumbled away as Hawk moved in for another punch. Human Pain, however, appeared behind him and grabbed his arms. He quickly put Charka locks on his arms before pushing Hawk to the ground. Behind Human Pain, Naraka and Preta quickly formed up. Hawk Uzune, you have caused me much trouble. Diva Pain said. Throughout your life you have suffered much and grown strong. But you cannot be allowed to get in my way for peace. Go burn in hell. Hawk roared. I shall maybe one day. But not today. Pain said. For now it is your turn to visit that place. A shape appeared behind Pain and Hawk gasped. From behind Pain emerged the human path. The body of Mika walked forwards. Her once dark red hair was now bright orange. Her cheeks were covered with 3 black rods on each side, with one on the bridge of her nose. Mika, Hawk whispered. You bastard. Pain shook his head. Animal Pain walked forwards slowly, pulling out a kunai as she did. I am no bastard, this world is full of them, however I am not one. I am a tyrant trying to bring peace. For we would all be tyrants if we had the chance. Hawk screamed as the kunai entered his face before it was cut off as it cut into his brain. We would all be tyrants if we could. Pain said, looking down at Hawk's body. Pain. Kitsune screamed, a noise that filled the land and made the Konoha ninja shudder as they saw Kitsune's body rise slowly. Pain, you bastard. You will pay. Kitsune screamed as he rose. You will pay. He threw his head backwards and emitted a roar that could have burst eardrums. Chakra began to swirl around him, creating a miniature tornado. He suddenly bunched up, leaning forwards as the chakra began to thicken and intensify. The Konoha ninja scrambled back as they felt the sheer force of it. Trees were ripped up and sent flying. Finally, someone who knows true pain. Pain said, forming hand signs. Almighty push. Kitsune screamed and released the chakra in a burst, causing it to create a dome which rapidly expanded across the land. Wind eruption jutsu. He screamed. The two pure forces of chakra hit each other. Kitsune's jutsu and pain slammed into each other and ripped apart the ground. Kitsune growled as they cancelled each other out, bursting towards Pain. The sound barrier was broken and he vanished from sight. Pain, the orange-haired god, was sent flying with a destructive punch that could have smashed a mountain in half. Kitsune followed his flight, hitting him mid-air with a spinning kick that would have cracked the ground open. Kitsune's body was swirling in chakra, some of it red and some of it white. Purge oblivion, he roared. A massive blinding red light covered the battlefield, causing the present ninja to cover their eyes. A massive beam of pure chakra slammed down from the heavens, hitting the ground with a deafening explosion which shook the world. The ground was ripped apart as the beam hit Pain. Pain, however, managed to swap places with the human path and watched in amazement as its body was ripped apart on a molecular level. The beam suddenly faded, leaving a crater the size of a small town in the battlefield. Such power! What pain he must have to create such a jutsu! Pain said. But his pain is nothing compared to mine, nothing compared to me. The Pain army set to work. Asura leapt forwards, spinning towards Kitsune. The latter stood there staring at the spinning orange blur. I don't care who you think you are, Pain. But listen here, the world isn't a fairy tale in a book. The world is a tough place, filled with hate. But some happiness existed in it. Some happiness exists in it right now. You do not have the right to decide others' happiness as you lack your own. Kitsune said. The masked hunter rushed forwards, ducking under a spinning blade of Asura and sending a crushing punch which destroyed the Asura Pain's body in one. I do not care what you have been through. But there are people out there who have dealt with worse pain than you. People who loved them and respected them. People who have dealt with pain since birth, been rejected and beaten. Betrayed by someone they love. Kitsune bellowed. Those people know true pain. Kitsune spun, sending an elbow into Asura which broke its head of instantly. The body dropped down, lying limply. What do you know of pain? What is your version of peace then, Kitsune? Pain asked coldly. I had reached peace after spending all of my life hated, unloved and beaten. For 14 years I faced hatred and pain before I found physical peace. Then after 4 years I found emotional and mental peace. But 1 year ago you ripped that from me. You took away my peace and replaced it with pain. And for that you will be destroyed, for that you will feel true pain. Kitsune roared. You would be selfish enough to remove peace of the world in favor of peace for yourself? Would you do that to the world, Naruto Uzumaki? Pain said. Kitsune looked at him with cold eyes, before reaching up and pulling off his face mask. It slipped off, revealing a deep scowl, whisker marks and a scar which reached up from the base of his cheek to the base of his eye. How did you know? Naruto asked softly. I've known since you left Konoha who you are. We have kept track of you. Pain said simply. Naruto shifted then, turning his body so that he was facing Pain but away from the Konoha ninja who were currently in combat with Asura. Currently none of them could tell it was him, but if they saw. It always interested me, Naruto, why hide everything from them? Pain asked. I feared for my family, my friends and myself. After I merged with Kurama I changed everything, scent, chakra and mindset. I gained a fox's traits, anger, hatred but also fear. There are some things that don't change, I guess. Naruto said. I guess so, now shall we begin? Pain said as the other 4 paths gathered behind him. Let's end this here. Naruto growled before leaping forwards. Summoning jutsu. The animal Pain, Naruto's ex-wife, roared. In front of the Pain army now stood a giant bear, clad in armor and carrying a massive double-headed axe. Naruto quickly bit his thumb and slammed it into the ground. Summoning jutsu. He roared. There was a massive poof of smoke from which a massive shadow could be seen. It quickly cleared to show a huge human-like form. Pain's eyes widened at the being before him. Elemental Titan, he said in shock. Their contract was lost during the First Great War. The being before him was seemingly made up of pure steel, like massive blocks of the metal had been fused together to make a monster of a being. It had no hands, instead just had blocks of steel for hands. The being was very human-like in form but lacked the key areas like a face. Instead it just had two red orbs for eyes and no visible mouth. "Naruto, why have you summoned me after all this time?" A deep voice said. "I need you to deal with that," Naruto said, pointing at the bear. "And anything else she summons. Isn't that—" the elemental being began. "Yes, Hinode, that is Mika," Naruto said, cutting him off. "She will have the most powerful set of beasts alive then, surely the elemental king would be better?" Hinode said. "I have faith in your skills," Naruto said before sprinting off towards Pain. Hinode nodded his massive head before turning and facing the bear. He nodded again before rushing forwards, slamming his massive fist into the bear's face. He then followed it up with a devastating uppercut. The Titan picked up the bear and threw him, causing a miniature earthquake on impact. He moved off to the east, leaving the main battlefield for his battle with the bear boss. Naruto, however, was not faring as well. He had managed to get in close enough to land a solid hit on the human path, destroying it in one massive wind blade jutsu slice. Now he was only facing off against 4 peens instead of 5. However, Hawk's death was not sitting well with him. He could feel his demonic side threatening to come out. He needed to reinforce the seal quickly or otherwise he would lose control. Naruto ducked under a swinging punch from Preta before sending a short wind blast that managed to knock the Pain backwards. He knew only short-ranged attacks which were lightning fast would work against this path. Quickly he spun, shifting enough off balance to turn the wild spin into a controlled chop. His fist thudded into Preta Pain before the path went flying off, a massive chunk missing in its neck. Naruto took control of the situation, blasting off after the already damaged Pain. The rest of the Pains raced after him, desperate to save one of the most important paths when fighting him. Naruto arrived before the Pain, seeing it struggle up. He quickly pulled out a kunai, grinning as the Pain's eyes widened. He grinned as he brought the blade across the neck, cutting the head clean off. However, when it fell off he frowned. This was too easy. He suddenly spun, ducking under a kick from Diva. He rolled sideways to avoid a downwards punch which could have broken a boulder. "What's wrong, Pain, losing your touch?" Naruto sneered. "Not losing my touch, boy, just building up for my ultimate jutsu." Pain growled. "A few more seconds and this will be all over." With that, Pain backed off, throwing his arms wide. Naruto eyed him warily, slowing, crouching. "My ultimate jutsu!" Pain roared. Naruto felt the ground shift below himself, his eyes widening. Massive sections of the ground were lifting upwards, moving at a shockingly fast rate towards Pain, who was now floating in midair. Naruto leapt backwards to avoid falling into the new fissure he had created. Naruto glanced around and growled as he saw the sheer scale of the ground which was being lifted. The elemental titan he had summoned along with the bear had vanished. The jutsu was even threatening the Konoha ninja, who were quickly backing away from the moving ground. Naruto was even more surprised to see the remaining Pains floating towards the Diva path. He growled when he saw them all disappear from view. "Kit," a voice inside his head called. "Kurama?" Naruto mentally asked. "Long time no speak. Why are you here now?" "I've seen this jutsu before. It's an ultimate destruction jutsu which was adapted from planetary devastation. It gathers energy and chakra into a massive ball before releasing it in a massive wave which can erase a continent. Well, that was the old sage's power. This guy could probably level everything here within a 70-mile radius unless you counter it," Kurama said in his head. "And how the hell do I do that?" Naruto asked. "You're going to have to release the seal on me, the adapted one," Kurama said. "Kurama," Naruto said. "Kid, there is no other way. You have to release the emotional mask you pretend to have. You say you hate these people and basically the of Konoha. Kid, you can't fool me. I know you better than this. You care for these people, you hate them for their actions, not for being themselves. This anger and sadness you have built up inside of you will destroy you," Kurama said. "Kurama, we both know what that jutsu does to the user," Naruto said. "Kid, you are going to die anyways in life, but this jutsu can end it here. It destroys anything connected to the target. Chakra and all, it can kill the real body of Pain. Surely that is worth 50 years of your life." Kurama exclaimed. Kurama, we both know the jutsu does more than that. Naruto said. Naruto sighed, he knew that Kurama was right. His mask was binging to slip. He could see Hawk and Michu noticing even though others were unable. Whilst Kurama had not control or power, he gave good advice and knew what was best for the world. Naruto still felt emotions towards Konoha, but he had long realized it was sadness and betrayal rather than anger. Eternal Cleansing Purge Blast. Naruto roared. A massive chakra beam erupted from Naruto, sucking out his life force and emotions. The beam erupted upwards, creating a blinding white light that forced the Konoha ninja to shade themselves. What followed made every other jutsu alive look weak. A massive explosion that shook mountains erupted from the sky above Naruto, sending white beams outwards which crushed everything in their path. At the exact same time, Pain erupted his jutsu, sending waves of blackness and fire outwards. The forces met with such power that ninja in Kumo and Iwa felt the earth shake. Below it all, Naruto fell to his knees. He looked upwards at the godly forces with a small smile on his face. He coughed, feeling the blood fall down his chest. Slowly he fell forwards, watching the world tilt before he hit the ground. Shikaku stared at the people in front of him. Loki stood with Sina and Michu flanking him, with Kisame bringing up the rear. They were currently standing at the northern Konoha fortress, about a day's travel from Konoha itself. You want to what? He said. We want to lead an all-out offensive on the Iwa stronghold 50 miles north of us. Loki said. That's not happening. It's too troublesome to do it. Shikaku said, shaking his head. Shikaku, we need to. Loki started. Boom. What the hell was that? Shikaku cried. Inoichi, what's happened? Massive explosion 20 miles away, beyond the mountain range towards Konoha. The blonde-haired member of the Ino Shika chokehold. As he said that, a massive wave of air slammed into them, knocking everyone off their feet. This was followed by a huge wave of chakra. Loki stared towards where the explosion had come from and his mouth dropped. A huge pillar of red energy was slamming into where a mountain had been. Naruto. He mumbled. Sina, Kisame, Michu, we gotta move now. Loki roared, getting up and sprinting off towards the explosion. The three other hunters nodded before leaping off after their leader. Shikaku got back to his feet, staring at where the mountain range had been. Konoha ninja, follow me, he roared before leaping off. As the four hunters got closer, they could see the sheer extent of the damage done to the land. Where a once great mountain range which had protected northern Konoha stood, was now a barren rocky wasteland. Trees had been uprooted and were lying scattered across the land. He's done it, hasn't he? Michu murmured. Loki turned, studying her for a second before nodding. Yeah, he has, he said. They traveled in silence at breakneck speed before they reached the main battlefield. They stood in shock at the destruction before them. The land had been ripped upwards, making a plateau of slabs which formed a broken plain. There were massive fissures in the group which dropped several hundred feet. I see him, Michu cried, leaping off towards where she saw a broken body. The other hunters followed quickly. What they saw when they arrived appalled them to their core. Even hardened killers like Loki and Kisame were shocked. The body of what had been the diva Pain lay in pieces in front of them. However, what made it worse was that most of the inner muscles and veins had been ruptured and had burst, leaving a bloody mess. Next to the body lay another. Naruto lay in a pool of his own blood. His trench coat had massive rips in it, revealing huge gaping wounds. His face mask was hanging in tatters, barely concealing his whisker marks. His bandana was lying in bits along with his hood. His other clothing was heavily ripped, but what made them worry the most was the seal currently forming around his heart. He did it, Michu whispered. He actually pulled it off. Sina, go and get the Hokage and that pink-haired girl ASAP. Loki ordered, watching as the young hunter leapt off. Loki watched Michu kneel by Naruto, pulling his head into her lap. Michu, they are going to find out who he is. We need to cover him up. Loki said. Huh? Naruto murmured. Michu stared at him, before leaning in to listen. Tears were running down her face. Hawk, Naruto whispered before he passed out. Michu stared to where Naruto had been pointing before a scream emitted from her. Hawk lay in a pool of his own blood, covered from head to toe in it. Loki, she screamed. Look, Loki spun, seeing the body of Hawk. He turned to Kisame. Get Hawk and bring him over here ASAP. He said. Kisame nodded, leaping off to where Hawk lay. He gently picked up Hawk, moving back over to where Naruto lay. Gently with care he laid Hawk next to Naruto. The older man tried to speak but coughed up massive amounts of blood. "Kid," he said after his coughing fit had finished. "Kid, we did it." Hawk slowly moved his hand up, brushing aside Naruto's blonde hair which over the years had grown longer. His thumb traced the scar on Naruto's face, following the bumpy line up his cheek. "You make me so proud, kid. You're like a son to me," Hawk said, coughing up more blood as the finished. "I'm proud to have called you my student." With that, Hawk shut his eyes and the hunters watched the life flow out of him. A single lone tear ran down Hawk's face before he died peacefully. He and his student together at the last. Michu cried then. Loki and Kisame stared in silence, thinking back to the energetic man who had been Hawk. He had been the toughest of them all, never backing down from a fight, taking anyone on no matter the odds. He and Naruto had formed a bond which made even brothers seem like strangers in comparison. Loki looked up after a while, turning his head to see the Konoha ninja who had been there already arrive. He saw shortly behind them another group of Konoha shinobi who had been at the fortress following closely. He quickly began to form some hand signs before a hand caught him. He looked down at Naruto's hand, stopping him from finishing the external henge on the blonde. "Don't bother," he said before he coughed. Blood trickled down his chin from his mouth. "Lady Hokage, he is over here," Sina cried before silencing as he saw the scene. Shock overtook him then as he saw Hawk and Naruto lying on the floor. Master and pupil, dead and dying. Sobs racked her then, finally the emotions she had been bottling up were let loose. She looked up as Tsunade approached. She saw the Hokage stop and stare. She saw the tears on her face as well. She heard the whisper, "Naruto." Tsunade whispered. Sakura, who hadn't yet got a good look at the man next to Hawk, leaned forwards to see. What she saw scarred her for life. "Naruto!" she screamed. The Konoha ninja behind Sakura froze. They exchanged shocked glances before moving into view for themselves. However, Sina blocked their path. "No one gets to see Kitsune without my permission, got it?" he growled. Tsunade and Sakura exchanged confused glances and looked over to see that Kitsune looked nothing like Naruto. Tsunade nodded then, until an official verdict could be done. Keeping his identity hidden was smart. If the villagers found out the demon had returned, along with the fact he was beyond powerful, riots would emerge and the village would either A. fall into chaos, or B. he would end up destroying the village. "We need to get him to a hospital ASAP," Tsunade said. Loki and Michu looked at her before nodding. Sina turned his head back, glancing over his shoulder. "Should I use that method?" Sina asked. "Yeah, only way it will be fast enough," Loki said. Sina nodded before taking a battle stance. He quickly flew through several dozen hand signs before there was a poof of smoke. The Konoha ninja's eyes widened as the smoke vanished. Where the hunters and Tsunade along with Sakura had been standing was an empty space. "What the?" Kiba said. Sakura felt herself being pulled sideways before being flipped around. She shut her eyes, feeling sick from the motion. She felt the sensation end and finally opened her eyes to find herself within the hospital. "What the hell was that?" she demanded, turning to face Sina. "Just a jutsu Kitsune taught me," he muttered before he passed out. "Whoa," Michu said, catching Sina. "Chakra exhaustion much." "Sakura, Lady Hokage, you deal with Kitsune. I'll handle this kid." Sakura and Tsunade nodded, quickly moving Kitsune into a ward. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at Loki when he followed. "I'm sorry, but you cannot follow us in here," she said. "Tough, I'm coming." End of story. Loki said. Suddenly Anbu surged forward surrounding Loki. His hand was inside his coat pocket, clutching what looked like a scroll. He was crouched low, turning slowly so that each Anbu got a look of pure killer intent. "I would let me in if I were you," he growled. "Lady Hokage?" one of the Anbu asked. "Let him in, but I want you at the room corners," Tsunade responded, moving into the room with Kitsune. However, before she entered, she leaned in quickly and whispered into his ear. "Activate the henge removal jutsu," she said. "I want to know who these people really are." The Anbu nodded. Loki followed the medical team into the room, taking place on the far wall from the surgery desk. Inside, Sakura had already begun medical work, trying to stabilize Kitsune. However, due to his henge, she was having trouble. The Anbu quickly went through hand signs, before deactivating every henge in the room. Tsunade's was removed to reveal an elderly woman. However, when Loki's and Kitsune's were removed there was uproar. Kitsune's was removed to reveal a battered Naruto. Tsunade and Sakura's fears were confirmed. They stood there for a moment, staring down at Naruto. Tears beginning to show. However, they were broken from the spell created when the Anbu leapt towards who had been Loki. After the henge had dropped they had attacked with killer intent. The henge had revealed a tall man, around 6 feet 4 feet. He was thin but every limb showed muscle. He was built similarly to Kakashi muscle-wise, not heavily built but gleaming in muscular power. He wore a black tank top, along with black trousers that went to just below his knees. He wore leg warmers along with ninja sandals. His jaw and cheeks were covered in bandaging that extended loosely to his neck. His black spiky hair was held in place by a ninja protector which showed a hidden mist village symbol with a line through it. Zabuza. Sakura whispered in shock. Zabuza raised his eyebrow at her before slamming a fist into the first Anbu's stomach. He spun kicking back another. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a scroll, quickly summoning a massive broadsword. He spun it quickly and rested it on an Anbu's shoulder. "I do your job and get on with healing him," he growled. Tsunade and Sakura nodded, quickly setting to work to avoid the rage of the demon of the mist. They quickly ripped off Naruto's battered and torn shirt to reveal his heavily muscled chest. Sakura frowned when she saw that almost half of his scars had reopened and were heavily bleeding. What worried her the most, however, was the veins around his heart. They were pumping blood at 10 times the rate they were meant to. This much pressure would kill him. "Lady Hokage," Sakura started. "I know, I saw," Tsunade said, turning to Zabuza. "Any thoughts on this?" Zabuza sighed, staring at Naruto. His old student had surpassed him years ago. He had taught him for a matter of months, but they had bonded well. He knew exactly what Naruto had done, but he couldn't admit it. "No idea, just heal his scars up and he'll be fine," Zabuza said bluntly. Sakura gave him a suspicious look, deciding to investigate further. She turned back to Naruto and went to work. One day later, Naruto was sitting on the same tree where Sakura and Sasuke had found him. He looked out across the forest around Konoha. It hadn't really changed much, which wasn't shocking. There were still the same villagers, the same ninja. It had only gotten stronger since he had left, which was frustrating. What frustrated him more was that they felt a need to hold everything back from him. He knew that the Konoha 11 had held back against him in a fight. He was due to meet with the Hokage and Fire Daimyo today, something about reinstatement or some crap. Now that Pain had been beaten, the Akatsuki had been destroyed. Orochimaru had gone into hiding, and peace was back. Yet Naruto still felt missing, like something was still missing. He looked around. He only had 50 years on his lifespan. Kurama had been silent since the fight. Not surprising, as his life force was tied to Naruto's now. Technically Kurama would be reborn, but it would be years from now. He knew Kurama had used up all the chakra he could give using that jutsu, but he still hadn't been able to prevent himself from harm. Sighing, Naruto dropped from the tree and looked around. He took one last long look at Konoha before slamming his left fist into his right palm. Summoning jutsu, he cried. A small stone golem popped into existence beside Naruto. It was a tiny version of the giant metal titan he had summoned in his fight with Pain. It was around 3 feet tall and stood there looking up at Naruto. "Tezuka, go to the meeting with the hunters and Hokage, along with the daimyo. Tell them I'm taking a short leave. Tell the Hokage that unless she allows the hunters to leave I will wipe the village out," he said to the little golem. "Gotcha Naruto, take care," Tezuka said, hopping off. With that, Naruto vanished. Hokage Palace. "What the hell do you mean?" Tsunade cried in shock. "You heard me," Sina exclaimed back. "Are you deaf? He cannot surely have lost that much." Tsunade bellowed. "Well, he has. Deal with it, Granny," Sina roared. The next thing anyone knew was Sina flying out of the wall and sailing out over Konoha. Everyone in the room stared awkwardly as Tsunade fumed at the massive hole in her wall. Michu sighed, walking to the hole. "I'll heal him again," she sighed before leaping out. Zabuza raised an eyebrow in amusement before turning to the collection of shinobi in the room. The Konoha 11 were there along with the elders and the elite Jonin. "Shall we continue matters then? We still have 3 topics left to cover." he said with a grin. Tsunade sighed, turning back to her place. She nodded for Zabuza to pick off where he left. As I was saying before the kid interrupted, Naruto as an Uzumaki had a lifespan of around 150 years, give or take a decade or two. Now combine that with the fox's chakra and life force and we could be looking at 200 to 250 years. However, if we assume that because he kid's a tough little guy and will defiantly live to 250 years, we can say that, after reviving me and another, he is down to about 150 years. Along with 2 eternal cleansing purge blasts, he is down to 50 years. Unless he can work out a solution with the fox, whenever he uses purge style he takes days off his lifespan. However, I believe he is coming close to working it out. Now he has used the jutsu, the fox could be gone for up to several months. Zabuza explained. We also have reason to believe that Pain survived the blast and is recovering with the Northern Alliance, so we can expect more from him. Kakashi added. Tsunade sighed in annoyance. So many issues. She could barely believe Naruto had shaved that much off his lifespan. The Uzumaki will be dealt with later, he is alive and that is all that matters. Danzo said. You say that like he is nothing more than a weapon. Zabuza growled. That is all he is, a demon for Konoha. Danzo growled. The next thing anyone knew was Danzo being slammed into Tsunade's desk. But not by Tsunade or anyone else. Zabuza had reappeared in front of Danzo and slammed him into the desk in one movement. His legendary blade was held at the elder's throat. Repeat that again, I dare you. Zabuza growled. My mistake. I apologize, Zabuza. Danzo muttered. Even he feared the demon of the mist, especially a reborn one with 10 years to end up like Naruto. Moving on, Tsunade said quickly as Zabuza let go of the root leader. The message from Naruto states that the hunters will be returning to the bastion and he is offering protection for the citizens of the village. Yes, anyone who has families is free to send them there. Zabuza responded. The bastion? Kiba asked curiously. It's the hunters' base of operations, our village as it were. Zabuza explained. I will tell you a little about it, but I would like to take everyone in this room apart from the elders there. The bastion is the hunter's base. A massive chakra basin mountain. The mountain bases itself on natural chakra, so it's godly tough. It took a long time, but we managed to create a tunnel inside, originally designed as a small base. But we found that after a couple of 100 meters the mountain is hollow. Being roughly a kilometer wide, we considered this a godsend. So we set up shop there, and after a year Senna came up with the idea of creating a sort of hidden village. But one designed for elite missing ninja to join us or for families from villages. We currently have 80 families living inside the bastion, which is roughly 320 civilians and a fighting force of 20 ninja, skilled at Jonin or higher. The base has one way in and one way out. The gate is molded by the mountain's chakra and requires either mine, Sinna, Michu, or Ren, Kisame, Itachi or Naruto's chakra to open. The bastion is divided into 7 levels, which you will see as you visit. The Konoha ninja soaked up the knowledge, grinning at the prospect of visiting this place. We have room for roughly another 280 civilians on our civilian level. So any that want to come need to have their applications done by the end of the week for Sinna to read. We will take anyone, as long as they will contribute to the bastion itself, Zabuza said. Now if you will excuse me, I need to check on Sinna and Michu and get a message to Itachi and Kisame. Zabuza said, bowing. As he left, Tsunade turned to the ninja. A small smile on her face. Myself, Kakashi, Yamato, Guy and the Konoha 11 along with Konohamaru will visit the bastion. I want the application details sent out. Make sure that the ramen stand owner, Ichiraku's, gets first choice. Tsunade ordered. You are all dismissed. 1 week later, Naruto stood on the top floor of the bastion, reading through the papers. Whilst Itachi was away, either he or Ren handled the running of the place. During the week he had paid tribute to his wife, child and sensei, placing memorials at their graves. He had also spent the week in thought, and he might have worked out a way to cancel out the effects of purge style. He needed Kurama, however. He had also come to terms with the losses and betrayals through his life. Whilst his emotions ruled him and his hatred strong, he felt more at ease. Naruto, the Konoha visitors have arrived with the hunters. An amused voice said behind him. He raised an eyebrow, turning to see Kuritsuchi watching him with a playful grin on her face. Ever since the start of the war, Kuretsuchi had been on the run from her grandfather and the Akatsuki. After realizing that the crimes they committed were beyond terrible, so she had wandered and finally met Naruto, joined the hunters and was now their head forge mistress. Many also suspected that she was madly in love with Naruto. Kuretsuchi was also one of the only people to bring out old Naruto. Along with Sina, Zabuza, Michu, Kisame, Eren and Itachi. I guess we should meet them then. Get Eren and tell him to meet me down there. It would be poor manners for us to not greet them with all of the 8 legendary hunters. Naruto said, a rare smile showing before the cold face reappeared. The pair quickly descended the levels, arriving at roughly the same time Eren did. Eren was the commander of level 5 and a monster of a man. Standing 6 feet 7, he towered over many, dwarfing Naruto and Kuretsuchi by a good 6 to 7 inches. He was solid, covered in hardened muscle and scars. The man carried a large staff of steel on his back and had a rough bandana tied around his head, covering his shaven head. He wore a black tank top with a short-sleeved jacket, black trousers and heavy size 13 black boots. Greetings Naruto, Kuretsuchi, he said in a calm voice. He always sounded calm and relaxed. His deep voice able to reach into your soul. Shall we greet them? The pair nodded and Eren stepped forwards, pressing his hand onto a pillar from the floor. Outside the Konoha group, along with the hunters stood waiting. They had made good time, arriving in a day's travel at the border of Suna and Iwa in the far west. Are we going to go in anytime soon or? Kiba asked impatiently. Anyways, where even is this mountain? All I see is desert. Patience boy, Zabuza snapped. Itachi stepped forwards and raised a single hand in a sign. Bastion release, he said simply. As if out of thin air, a towering mountain appeared, stretching several thousand meters into the air. It reached nearly to the clouds and dwarfed the Hokage monument. Whoa, Kiba gasped, along with the Konoha ninja. Bastion Gate, recognize your guardian, Itachi cried out. The Konoha ninja watched in pure awe as the area of mountain in front of them, roughly 3 meters high by 5 meters wide, seemed to shift. Sand rose up on either side, shifting away to leave a rocky pathway. The wall of the mountain suddenly broke apart, sliding apart from the middle. If you would kindly follow me, Itachi said. He led the group into the mountain, with Zabuza locking the door behind them. As they walked through the tunnel, the Konoha team were filled with excitement. Their excitement was fulfilled, not once but 1,000-fold. As they exited the tunnel, they entered a cavern that must have been at least 400 meters high. It was a vast space, roughly 600 meters across, forming a massive cylinder. Around the walls were sub-levels, with the houses built into the walls. There were 8 sub-levels with one large walkway around the edge on each level. The large walkways were connected by 4 more walkways leading to a single large pillar roughly 40 meters wide in the center. The large ground space was filled with large statues and gardens, making the place beyond imagine. Like a hidden palace under the mountain. Drawing of base. Side view. House underscore, pillar, underscore house. 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 Shop underscore, pillar, underscore shop. Shop underscore, pillar, underscore shop. Then sides would be connected to the central pillar by a walkway, creating an X shape with the pillar at the center. I don't know how helpful that was, but I hope it gives you an idea of the layout. Back to story. Whoa, Ino muttered. Greetings. Eren called to the Konoha teams. Welcome to the Bastion, esteemed ninja. I am Eren, commander of the 5th level. Hiya, I'm Kuretsuchi, commander of level 1. Kuretsuchi greeted brightly, grinning. Wait a second, aren't you the Tsuchikage's granddaughter? Kakashi asked. Well yes, before I disowned him. Kuretsuchi. Anyways, come on Naruto, introduce yourself. Kuretsuchi had changed a lot, growing her hair but keeping it in a ponytail. He now wore black tight trousers along with a worn battle top, with the right sleeve ripped off to the shoulder. The young lava user whacked Naruto's head playfully. The blonde frowned, grumbling. As you already know, I am Naruto, commander of level 6. Quote, I am Kisame, commander of level 3. Kisame answered quickly afterwards. Zabuza, commander of level 7. Zabuza followed. Michu, or Haku as Kakashi may know me. Haku said with a smile. Commander of Level 4. Haku let her hinge drop, revealing a drop-dead gorgeous woman. Her hair was below shoulder length. Sakura and Kakashi exchanges looks of shock at that. Had she been brought back as the other person? Finally me. Sina or Inari as Sakura and Kakashi and Sasuke know me. Commander of Level 2, where we are now. Inari grinned. The young boy was gone, replaced by a powerful, almost spitting image of his stepfather. His hair was cut short and he had a small beard growing. Shall we begin the tour? Inari grinned, leading them off. We are currently stationed on the civilian level, which I managed as the commander of Level 2. Here we have the families and shops which make the backbone of our little village. Most of these people are wave villagers, by the way. On this level we have 8 sub-levels. The top 6 are housing built in the walls. Each house has 4 bedrooms, a kitchen, a bathroom and a living room. Below that we have shops and hotels and restaurants. We have a single hotel that can hold 30 people along with 60 shops and restaurants. My job is to provide laws and order, manage the level. I keep the peace and decide whether shops open or close. I also decide the applications as well, Inari explained. Wait, so if this is Level 2, where is Level 1? Sakura asked curiously. That is where we will be going next, if you would follow me. Kuritsuchi answered. The young commander led the group towards the central pillar, nodding to many of the civilians as they passed. As they approached the pillar, Kuritsuchi held out her hands and pressed against the pillar. The walls shifted, showing a large empty circular room. A single small 1-meter-high pillar stood proudly in the middle. Everyone in? Kuritsuchi asked. Excellent. Now get ready. We are going down to Level 1. She reached across and placed a hand upon the pillar, and the disc began to slowly shift downwards. The plate that had been the floor began to slide downwards, slowly gaining speed as it dropped. This is what we call an elevator. It allows us to ascend and descend with speed and carry large loads up and down. And since there is only one, if we were to be attacked we could completely shut off the lower 2 levels from the top levels. We will be heading roughly 500 meters below ground level down to the forges. As commander of the forges I am in charge of the running and creation of weapons and tools and various other needs for the bastion. However, with a small number of people working here, I have a team of 12 villagers who are all masters of their craft. The majority of the work, however, is done by the elemental titans. The what? Kiba asked. Do you not know? Kuritsuchi asked. Did Naruto not tell you? She frowned as the Konoha group shook their heads. She rounded on Naruto with a furious expression. You didn't tell them this was a summoning mountain? She bellowed at him. I didn't think they needed to know. He replied simply. You idiot, of course they needed to know. She roared, whacking him on the head. The young blonde leapt out of the way, frowning deeply. He sighed and formed a hand sign, vanishing in a blur. Kuritsuchi stood fuming, glaring upwards. I shall explain whilst she sorts that out. Eren said. This mountain is home to the elemental titans. Massive summoning creatures of the 6 different elements of the world. Earth, wind, water, fire, lightning and finally metals. They live down in the forge levels, working to create massive weapons. Since Naruto is their contract holder we can live here. They are excellent workers, true masters of their craft. Kuritsuchi said. Right, I think we are here, let's go. She pressed her hand to the wall and it slid apart. To say the Konoha group were impressed was an understatement. They were standing in a massive cavern roughly 400 meters tall and so vast that the far walls could not be seen. The surrounding area was filled with massive furnaces and forges where titans of various different sizes worked. Beyond the forge area was a massive plain, filled with boulders and pillars. More titans roamed the land, collecting rocks and various gems which were littering the room. Welcome to the forges of the bastion.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.